Chapter 644. Now he finally had the chance to deal with the Rutilius. His next step would be to find and assassinate one of their governing bodies after he completed this task. Meanwhile, at the moment, he had plans to ambush Rutilia's squads that had a mission given to them to visit Region 35. Just like they planned on ambushing a location that belonged to the Gildans in the dead of night, Gustav planned to ambush them also in the dead of night before they arrived there. It was planned to be an unexpected attack with a large number of Rutilias, which would not only leave the opposition stunned and astonished, but would also leave them unable to react and outmanned. So winning the battle would be easy. Even though they would be in enemy territories, the opposition would definitely not be able to send out reinforcements so fast, which meant the Rutilias might get away with it, and with little casualty as well. At this point, Gustav recalled all the routes that led to the outskirts of Region 35, and made his decision on where the group was going to be ambushed to stop them from ambushing the Gildans, and also bring down their numbers. Gustav had decided at this point that none of them would be returning alive. Gustav rested and waited after making a few more plans that included traps and a diversion to make sure the Rutilias passed by the route he planned to make use of. About 2 hours later, Fiona and Darkly arrived at his room door, and he let them in. Both of them greeted respectfully, and it was around evening at this time, which meant only a few hours were left before the operation. As they got in, Gustav instantly went straight to the point, explaining why he needed them here and how they'd be going back to the groups he instructed them to join after they were done here. Squad leader, there are 80 of them. Are you sure you don't want the others joining? Darkiel asked. That won't be necessary. I will be taking care of most of them. I just need you two to watch my back, Gustav disclosed. Never knew a day would come when you would say those words, the system chipped in his head. Shut up, Gustav responded bluntly in his head, not dwelling on the system's words as he continued speaking to his subordinates. Fiona and Darkly stared at each other for a few moments before smiling and nodding. They knew better than continue remaining worried since Gustav sounded so confident at the moment. It had already been about 3 weeks since they arrived here, and so far, Gustav hadn't made any wrong calculations, so they had all come to trust him whenever he said things would be fine in any situation where he made adequate plans. Gustav explained to them how the mission would be carried out and the objective of not leaving a single person alive. After they both understood properly and knew their role in this, all they had to do next was wait. At nightfall, all 3 of them set out. Fly during the dark of night, purplish glowing massive wings flapped in the sky, carrying an angelic-looking figure that could barely be seen along with it as it streaked towards the outskirts of Region 35. Gustav, on the other hand, barely caused any attention as he bolted across rooftops clad in a black and whitish gorilla mask. Thumb. He was able to keep up with Fiona's speed as he leaped across several rooftops in a single leap and kept traveling towards the outskirts of the region as well. Fiona happened to be lifting Darkiel in her arms as she flew across the skies since he was slower than Gustav and herself. In a matter of minutes, they closed in on an area that led to a dead end, but it wasn't actually a dead end. Close to the end of the street where the last building was located, there were 3 massive tunnelways that led to the outskirts of Region 35. The moment one arrived on the other end of the massive tunnelways, they'd be heading towards another region. The one in the middle happened to be the only one that led to Region 36. The other 2 lead to different regions, and there was literally a mountain-like blockage reaching as high as the skies, preventing a scale over. Only Fiona and Gustav could manage to arrive at the top, but it might not be worth it due to the weather occurrences that usually happened at the top. Passing through the tunnel actually made things a lot safer when leaving the region. There's no guarantee that they'll pass through here, but this is where we need them to pass through, Gustav voiced out as he landed right in front of the middle passageway. He said this because there was an alternate route to get into Region 35 through 36. Gustav walked forward amidst the stares of Darkiel and Fiona behind, and arrived 2 steps into the massive tunnelway in the middle. It was so big that Gustav only looked like a dot at its entrance. Calm. He knocked twice on the side of its wall, noting the sturdiness. It won't fall so easily. I'm not sure there are enough explosives, Gustav thought with a slightly worried look. After thinking for a few moments, Gustav came up with the best way to handle it. They'll just focus the explosives on a particular area. If the force is concentrated in one side, that part will crumble for sure. Gustav said internally and turned around to face both of them. "Follow me," he stated and turned back around to head in deeper into the tunnel. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav activated God Eyes and stared at different parts within the tunnel, looking for the best area where the explosives could be placed. "Plant your explosives on this side," Gustav voiced out and pointed at a particular part of the tunnel roofing area. Chapter 645. He proceeded to bring out the explosives left in his storage device and handed them over to both of them. "We'll go make sure our guests only follow this route. Make sure to cluster the explosives in that particular spot," Gustav instructed and dashed forward into the far ends of the tunnelway. "Understood," both of them voiced out, but Gustav's figure had already disappeared into the distance. The tunnelway was well lit with glowing and floating lights up above. Fiona felt this was truly the best course of action, planting all the explosives at one particular area because she recalled that some hovercars had alarm systems in them that allowed to sense when an area was rigged with explosives. This reduced the risk of that happening since they were all in one spot and would probably explode before they arrived there. While they were busy with this, Gustav arrived on the other end of the tunnelway in about 6 minutes of running. It was close to midnight at this point, which was the time where the Rotilias said they'd be traveling here. Gustav stared at the wilderness-like area and the roads leading to different places that seemed to be an intersection between the regions. The paths were dimly lit, but Gustav could see properly even into the distance. He turned towards the left and activated dash before charging onwards once again. In a few more minutes, Gustav arrived in front of a path that came from up ahead that led to the Region 35. Behind, he could see the first building spotted upon entering the region. Turning around, he blasted off and arrived about 200 meters before the first building by the right side of the road. Gustav's body began to bloat as he activated something. Collapsal alien transformation activated. His skin turned greenish as he turned into a massive round figure with 2 heads and multiple long blades spider-like legs. Shroom, icicle-like rocks suddenly began protruding from the ground, making a straight line along the middle of the road and blocking it. It rose and kept rising, sticking together and protruding out of the ground endlessly. The Iro silk created a long wall that stretched on and stretched on for up to a mile until it hit a block, and Gustav didn't stop there. The walls created out of the Iro silk continued to grow taller and taller until it was even higher than the 40-story building behind. This area happened to still be far from where there was a lot of activity within the region from the people dwelling there, but some of them could still spot the massive diamond-colored walls that had risen above the ground and wondered how it appeared there. After this was done, Gustav felt a bit out of breath and slightly weak, but he still climbed across the wall he created as quickly as he could in his collapsal form since he was like a gigantic spider. Arriving atop the wall, he moved towards the far right and transformed back into his normal form. Gustav proceeded to sit atop the wall on an Iro silk, protruding out in a horizontal format, and regain his energy while waiting for the Rotilia troops to arrive. His recovery was quite fast since he still had system energy points. Using the collapsal took energy directly from his body. However, so long as he still had system energy points, he would get rejuvenated quickly. Still, if the system energy points get used up completely, Gustav would only be able to fight with his internal energy. It didn't take a lot of waiting before Gustav sensed speedy movement up north. He could see flickering lights in the distance, and even without activating God Eyes to get a closer look, he already knew that the Rotilias had arrived here. He proceeded to contact Fiona and Darkly at this point. "Are the preparations done?" he asked while standing to his feet atop the wall. "Yes, squad leader," Fiona responded. "Good. We'll be getting visitors soon. Activate the timer," Gustav voiced out and cut the communication. Phew. He proceeded to leap off the wall. His jacket flapped intensely before he landed on the ground and sped back towards where he came from. Meanwhile, the Rotilia troops arrived in front of the massive spiky icicle-structured wall. Their vehicles stopped right in front, and some of them got off with confused expressions on their faces as they stared up. They were dressed in bluish and white striped colored tight-skinned leather-like uniformed outfits. How did this get here in the middle of the road? One of them voiced out and walked towards the wall. Of course, he was met with no answer as the others also gazed at each other with confused looks. They turned to the sides to see if they could go around it, but all they could see was the wall stretching as far as the eyes could see. One of them decided to call back to the command center to report this unexpected situation, but the commander in charge of this objective stopped them. "Let's try going around first. Some of you go left, while the others follow right with me," he voiced out while getting back into the hover car he just came out of. There were around 30 vehicles, and they all separated, turning to the sides as the half moved along the right side of the wall, while the other half moved along the left side. This continued for minutes, and they realized the wall went on for longer than they expected. Realizing that if they reached the end of the wall, they wouldn't be able to go in through the route that led to Region 35. The commander communicated to everyone to stop and turn back around. They all drove back to the initial starting point. "We will have to make use of the alternate route. The trio tunnelways," he voiced out in the communication devices. Chapter 646. "We will have to use the alternate route. The trio tunnelways," he voiced out in the communication devices. Some of them here knew of the other route, so the instant the trio tunnelways were mentioned, they looked towards the east, which was also the same direction Gustav disappeared into before they arrived here. They were still in a dilemma on how this massive wall appeared here, but if they wasted any more time, it would affect their night mission. So the commander in charge of this mission wanted them to get over to Region 35 as soon as possible. "Sir, don't you think this is a bit suspicious?" One of the troop members walked over to the man in charge and voiced out before he could get into the hover car. "How so?" he asked. "This wall appearing here on the route that is supposed to lead to Region 35, and there happened to be only one route left that can lead us to there. I think we should abandon the mission this night and make proper inquiries before embarking on it again to be sure we're not walking into a trap," the troop member suggested. "You think I didn't think of this?" "Haha, no, we're not abandoning the mission," the commander voiced out. "This is not the style of the Gildans. If they knew we were coming for them, they'd send out forces to stop us. Besides, we can't go back with failure. You're just an ordinary member, so you won't understand the consequences," he added with a glare before moving to enter his vehicle. The troop member had no option but to move towards the hover car he stepped down from. The commander communicated with all the troop members while driving towards the area where the trio tunnelways were located. "Be on the alert as we go in. Activated the weapon systems of your vehicles," he commanded as they approached the tunnelway. Meanwhile, Gustav had arrived back in the middle tunnelway that led to Region 36 a few minutes back. He inspected the area where the explosives were clustered on the ceiling area, which was well around 50 feet high. "Good." Gustav nodded his head and turned around to head back to the entrance area where Fiona and Darkly were waiting. "Hide yourselves. They'll be getting here soon," Gustav stated, and proceeded to leap towards the mountain wall above the tunnelway. CrYHHH, a small cracking sound was made as he dug his fingers into the wall and stuck to it. Fiona and Darkly moved towards the sides, hiding behind the small rocky bumps. They all focused on the tunnelway ahead. In about 2 minutes, Gustav could sense the approaching convoy up ahead within the middle tunnelway. The timer of the explosives also seemed to be in line with the approaching convoys. Gustav calculated the speed of the vehicles and could tell that it would explode the moment the vehicles on the second line got to that area. FYI, the hover cars moved with speed, and the instant the first two who were moving side by side arrived at the area where the explosives were placed above, the alarm system within went off. However, it was all too late because they weren't able to stop the vehicle. Neither were they able to alert the others in time. The moment they phased past and the vehicles on the second line arrived at that spot, boom, a massive explosion set off. The middle tunnelway was instantly covered in bright red flames and fumes. KRRYYHHHH, the entire mountain trembled from the force of the explosion, and cracks appeared on some parts. Bam! Fly! Several more blasting sounds rang out as parts of the tunnelway ceiling collapsed in large chunks, falling onto some of the hover cars. While the hover cars closer to the point of the explosion were sent flying out through the entrance of the tunnelway. Some exploded into bits while some spiraled repeatedly across the air and crashed up front, causing a lot of damage for the passengers within. At this point, a quarter of the Rotilia's troops were either seriously injured or dead. The commander, who happened to be in one of the hover cars in the middle, jumped out before he could get crushed by a large chunk from the tunnelway ceiling. The massive chunk smashed the hover car, which weighed nothing less than 15,000 pounds. Even though parts of the ceiling in the tunnelway collapsed, it didn't block the entrance area completely, so there was still space for a drive-through. Some of the hovercars far behind had stopped their movements upon seeing the blast up ahead, and even turned around to avoid getting hit by the shockwaves from the blast. Parts of the ceiling were still cracking, so the commander leaped towards a hovercar and landed atop the roof, letting it carry him through the rubble. "We're under attack. Arg!" A loud voice was heard from the communication device within the hovercar. The commander instantly became alarmed, but he couldn't tell them to turn around because of the dropping chunks of rocks falling from above. The hovercar, along with the others behind, moved with speed and precision, occasionally swerving left and right to avoid getting hit as they sped forward. Fwye, the moment the commander was standing on the hovercar, phased through the fire cover up ahead and went past the entrance of the tunnelway, he spotted several hovercars destroyed in the distance. His eyes widened as he spotted the figures clad in dark outfits slaying some of his troops, who were already laid out on the ground. This was also when he spotted several hovercars by the side, slashed in half, which was something the fire couldn't do. Just as he activated his bloodline, the figure cloaked in a black outfit, wearing a whitish gorilla-like mask, bolted forward. Swoosh! The figure was so quick that his right arm was still being arched backward with circular yellowish-colored energy spiraling around it when the figure flew across the air with his leg outstretched. Chapter 6:47. Bang! He took a kick to the chest, which felt like he was being smashed by a moving mountain as his entire body catapulted towards the wall of the mountain up above the tunnelways. Bam! His entire body lodged a few inches deep into it as blood flowed out of his body, and his eyes turned blurry. What sort of monster is that? I was taken out in one hit. These were his last thoughts before he passed out. The lingering echoes of his subordinates' screams also rang faintly in his ears before everything turned dark. Retreat! Retreat! One of the troop members kept shouting out as they spotted the manslaughter that was happening up front. But the mountain was still vibrating from the impact of the blast that had just happened, even though chunks of rocks had stopped falling within the tunnelway. It didn't seem safe, so the drivers hesitated before turning around to head back in. However, Fiona flapped her wings once arriving in front of a hovercar and swinging her left wing out. Fwye, a purplish arc of energy slashed forward, dividing the hovercar in half and slicing a troop member sitting in the middle in half along with the car. This told them that whatever was up ahead was something they couldn't handle, so the remaining troops quickly turned around and decided to retreat. Tranquil, who had just finished dealing with a bunch of troops behind, charged forward with darkness oozing out from his being. The entire tunnelway in front was instantly covered in darkness, making the drivers and everyone within blind. They made use of their lights, but the darkness was so thick they couldn't see in front. Kairar! Sounds of flesh ripping apart along with screams could be heard close by, causing all of them to look around with panic-stricken faces. Tranquil was attacking several troops at the same time because this darkness was his domain, and he could be everywhere at the same time within it. He literally becomes omnipresent within the darkness. Kiar. Arg. Screams filled the place as sounds of flesh ripping continued to reverberate across the place. They never could see him coming. They only found their throats slit open before they could understand what was happening. Tranquil was moving around, slaughtering as many as he could while Fiona dealt with those that were still behind and hadn't gotten into the tunnel. Some hover cars up ahead were able to drive past the range of the darkness even though they couldn't see, giving them the chance to escape. There were about 6 of them. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash. Gustav, who could see through the darkness with the help of God Eyes, had spotted them and bolted across the tunnelway with immense speed. Swoosh! He streaked past the 6 hover cars and appeared right in their fronts. 2 atomic blades appeared in his right and left hand, respectively. Dashing forward again, Gustav swung the atomic blades twice at the first one by the left, cutting through it and spinning around to decapitate the driver. Fwye! The moment the car was cut through, all the driver could see was a milky-colored blade slicing past him with fast speed, and his vision began spiraling. Gustav didn't stop there and jumped away towards the side, slashing out repeatedly to destroy the next hovercar. The others behind began shooting at him with the hovercar's weapon system. Gustav swerved several times across the place, and one of the hovercars took this opportunity to drive forward and tried to hit him. Whoosh! Green skin appeared on Gustav's body as he jumped back with speed. KrrYCVHHH. A massive icicle-like rock shot out from his initial position, piercing straight through the hovercar from underneath. Kyrar. This attack accurately also struck the driver, piercing through him and hanging him on the tip of the icicle-like rock along with the hovercar. The others who were still alive had looks of shock as they recognized the unique structure of this icicle-like rock. They remembered the wall that had prevented them from heading to Region 35 through their initial route. The feeling of doom washed over them as they gulped down saliva while staring at this masked man in a black outfit. They knew such a thing couldn't be pulled off by an ordinary person. Some of them turned around to run while some of them still tried attacking Gustav, since they felt this was the only way they could get away from here. Gustav dashed forward and tanked all their attacks while also sending out his bang, 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 boom. The sounds of collision and explosion reverberated across the place for a few more minutes, along with screams, before everywhere finally turned silent. The only thing that could be heard was the occasional fire flickering sounds due to the explosions that had occurred all across the place. Gustav, Fiona, and Darkeel met up once again at the entrance of the tunnelway. Darkeel and Fiona sustained a few injuries due to the numbers. It was quite impossible to dodge all the projectiles, but they had managed to complete tonight's objective. Gustav, however, was unscathed except for his clothes that seemed to have taken some damage due to the fiery explosions that occurred multiple times. "Good job," Gustav said to both of them. "Let's go," he voiced out before dashing forward. Darkeel held onto Fiona's arms as her wings sprouted out of her back, and she flapped them. Foom. The glowing purplish wings flapping across the sky created a glowing streak that cut across the sky beautifully. While on the ground, dark afterimages were left in Gustav's trail as they traveled back towards their hideout. "The MBO camp, how do you feel now?" Dr. Levi voiced out within the laboratory as he stared at Angie's frame. Like everything that went on for the past 2 months were terrible nightmares, Angie voiced out with a slightly frightened expression. "Oh, I can assure you that everything that had happened so far was real." Chapter 648. "Oh, I can assure you that everything that had happened so far was real," Dr. Levi responded bluntly. Angie held her head with a look of pain and disappointment while looking down and recalling everything that had happened. She was currently sitting on a kind of medical board, and it seemed Dr. Levi was checking her to be sure she was completely fine now after taking the cure. Falco, Ildris, Glade, Matilda, and Indrik were all in the vicinity as well, standing by the sides. "It's not your fault," Dr. Levi said while tapping onto her left shoulder area. "The ailment also messed with your mental state. It was all part of the process, but now you're completely okay," he added. Angie pursed her lips while still staring at the floor. Falco moved closer to her and sat right beside her. "All that matters now is you're okay now," he voiced out. "I can't believe I'm capable of feeling so much hatred. My thoughts, my head, every emotion was consumed by the feeling of hatred," Angie muttered with panic-stricken eyes as she recalled all that had happened when she was still infected. "Dr. Levi said it affected your mental state. That must be why," Glade voiced out as she sat beside Angie and held her hand in a loving manner. "It was me? I wanted to shred him to pieces." Angie's voiced out her thoughts, which scared her to the core. Indrik, who was standing up ahead, walked over to Angie's position and stood in front of her. "It was all my fault. You had every right to act the way you did. I nearly destroyed your future hopes. Anyone would have hatred towards someone who did that," Indrik stated with an apologetic look. He didn't seem mad in any way. Instead, he looked remorseful. Angie raised her head and stared at Indrik with an apologetic look as well. "I'm so sorry, Indrik. I'm sure Gustav will hate me when he comes to hear of this," Angie voiced out and placed her face in her palm, hiding the look of regret in her eyes. "He will understand," Falco said while rubbing Angie's hair. "There's no reason for him to hate you." "You were sick," Matilda voiced out from the side. EE and Eldris also moved closer to comfort Angie as well, which made her cheer up a little as she kept apologizing to everyone, Indrik included. But at this moment, she came to an understanding of herself. I felt it from the very depths of my soul, the hatred. If not for my feelings towards Gustav, I would have killed Indrik already. There is darkness within me, Angie said internally with a slightly troubled look, but she managed to mask it well enough to not make the others worry. Angie could tell that if she ever turned to the dark side, she would become an unthinkable murderer because the thoughts flowing into her mind during the phase of the sickness were thoughts she was scared to even think about at the moment. After Dr. Levi finished his checkup on Angie's internal structure, he announced that she was now completely okay and her bloodline was returning to normal, albeit strained. Angie noticed that her body did feel a bit weird inside, but it was barely noticeable. Surprisingly, her bloodline even improved, according to Dr. Levi, but that was something she would be checking out on a later date because she currently had to rest. Indrik returned to his room after everyone had parted ways. I sensed the lingering energy of the outworldly on every one of your group. It would seem the outworldly once resided in this vicinity, secluded in a space canyon from the outside world. The gemstone floated out of Indrik's storage device and began voicing out. What? Every one of us? Indrik thought as he pictured all 6 of them, EE, Ildris, Falco, Glade, Matilda, and Angie. Space Canyon? What's that? Indrik added as these terms also made him confused. The Space Canyon is like a breach within a universe. The creation of a small world inside another world, but still being able to link both worlds to each other in a way that makes it look like the other world is still a part of the original world. Entry and exit points are created and linked to the original world. Without those, it is impossible to get access to the small world, the gemstone explained lengthily. A little confusing, but I think I understand. Are you saying this isn't even the real world? Indrik's eyes widened as he came to this realization. Yes, this world is artificial but at the same time real since it is linked to the original Earth and also made in its image, the gemstone added. Indrik had a look of astonishment written all over his face at this moment. He began playing scenes of everything that had happened here since he arrived in his mind. It was impossible to tell that this wasn't even the real world. If Gustav was here at the moment, he would now understand why no matter how much he ran forward trying to leave camp, it was impossible. He would always find himself circling around even though he never turned to the sides while running. This was why the camp had no edges, no walls whatsoever. It was impossible to reach the end because, at a particular point, the laws of the place began to force you to change direction unknowingly. Wow, Indrik muttered. The mixed bloods of this era have come a long way. It takes a lot of power to pull this off, and they managed to make one which such a big landscape, the gemstone voiced with a praising tone. They must be quite the powerful ones in this era, but even them cannot prevent what is to come, the gemstone said with a tone of foreboding. You say you could sense the energy of the outworldly around the group I was with earlier, Indrik muttered. Chapter 649. Yes. The outworldly must be someone close to them, just like you. I sense a force of calamity as well as embers of the outworldly energy around that silver-haired horned girl even more, the gemstone voiced with a worried tone. You mean Angie? Indrik inquired with a tone of realization. The outworldly must have been around her a lot. She carries more of the embers of the outworldly energy. However, I currently cannot sense the presence of the outworldly in this domain, the gemstone stated. But there's no one close to them that is also close to me. Indrik was a bit confused as he tried to figure out who it could be. Truly a person is missing from the group, but he isn't close to me. I ruined our relationship, Indrik voiced out with a tone of guilt. And who is this person to you? The gemstone inquired. Was. I don't even know. We're related by blood, but I don't deserve to call him brother, Indrik voiced out with a tone of regret as he lay on his bed. Ah, I see. Related by blood, the gemstone voiced out with a tone of understanding. Yes, but we're not close, so he can't be the one, Indrik responded with a dismissive expression. Besides, is the outworldly not supposed to be a mixture of 2 personalities? He doesn't have 2 personalities. Indrik voiced out. Are you sure? The gemstones asked. I have never seen him exhibit a different behavior since he changed more than a year back and became more powerful compared to his former weak self, and turned colder, and hated everyone, killed, became the most influential cadet during the test phase due to his prowess, became #1 strongest first-year mixed blood in the space of 6 months. The more Indrik voiced out these achievements, the more his face turned stunned, and he paused before. It doesn't seem like two personalities. It just seemed like he changed. He can't be the one, right? Indrik voiced with a tone of disbelief. He seemed quite perplexed at this point, and his face looked like a lot of things were running through his mind. We will find out, the gemstone responded. Where is this person you speak of? It proceeded to ask. Oh, big bro. Gustav is currently on a mission. He probably won't be back till after 3 months' time, Indrik responded. I see. Pending his return, we shall do research, and I will impart knowledge upon you. Region 35. The night had gone by, and Gustav, along with the others, passed their night at the hideout. Fiona had her own room where they had lodged while Gustav and Tranquil took a room for themselves. However, just as always, Gustav stayed on the rooftop the rest of the night channeling his bloodline. The destruction of the 80-plus troops sent by the Rotilias was currently being investigated. The investigation was ongoing on the site, and Gustav had sneakily gone over to check earlier, but he wasn't bothered because they had cleaned up their act well enough. They only needed to complete a few more similar objectives, and they'd have run down the numbers of the Rotilia troops by a lot. As Gustav saw the sun rising, he stood to his feet atop the rooftop with a smile on his face. I took a shorter time than expected reaching the second step, Gustav muttered as he sensed his strength increase. He was now the second step Falcon ranked. Gustav had to be the quickest mixed blood in history to go from the first to the second step of Falcon rank so quickly beside Miss Amy. Their speed of improvement seemed to be around the same level since Miss Amy was still legendary among all mixed bloods across every generation of mixed bloods, reaching a high level of strength at such a young age. Gustav was a little satisfied with his progress, but he knew this was nothing compared to the strongest level, which he had only 4 years left to attain. It looked very impossible, but Gustav knew he had to try his best. He'll have to travel to several locations to do more research on Humbad after this. Gustav hadn't forgotten the second mission. It was a bit stagnant since Miss Amy provided information the last time, but he had ideas of places to check for research. However, his current situation was one in which he put himself to increase his rank within the MBO since it was quite necessary. He had decided to continue with the Humbad research after checking on Boss Danzo in Burning Sand City. The most important thing right now was to complete the mission here as soon as possible, get his rewards, and hopefully increase more in rank. You said over time you'll give me more information on what is to come and why I need to complete the 2 5-year quests you issued, Gustav voiced out internally to the system. Yeah, but of course, you'll have to complete some objectives first and reach a certain level of strength to get a piece of information revealed, the system responded. In other words, you remain unhelpful in making me understand what I'm up against, Gustav said in his head. No. If I were to reveal all this to you, I can guarantee that even with the bravery points you have gathered, you will still get scared out of your wits, the system added. I don't see any point in being secretive. It's better I know early, so I become more prepared, Gustav argued. That's why these objectives will be issued for you to complete. Completing them proves your readiness to a certain level, which will also prompt me to reveal a piece of information as well, the system explained. And I still haven't completed any of them? Gustav asked. None whatsoever. Just patiently continue with your endeavors for now. Believe me, you're not ready yet. The system stopped speaking at this point. Gustav was left to ponder about their dialogue for a few seconds before he finally decided to head into the building. Chapter 650. Gustav was left to ponder their dialogue for a few seconds before he finally decided to head into the building. Fly. Jumping over the ledge, his body descended across the northeast side of the building. His jacket flapped in the wind as he landed on the first balcony area there. Only a small thumping sound was made as his knees bent forward a little before he straightened himself. The door to the balcony area was opened, and Darkel's figure, along with that of Fiona, could be seen in front. They seemed to be arguing about something, but their mouths hung open when they spotted Gustav standing at the balcony area. Of course, they had witnessed his landing. Squad leader, they both voiced out together respectfully. What's up? Gustav responded as he walked forward. Nothing. Darkeel keeps comparing your speed to mine. Fiona voiced out at the same time Darkeel said nothing. Oh. Gustav had a bit of interest on his face as he exclaimed. Darkeel had a wry look on his face as he stared at Fiona. He says you're faster than I am, Fiona stated. And what do you think, Fiona? Gustav asked. I'm faster, Fiona answered bluntly with a look of confidence. You are. But it depends on the situation, Gustav said in response before walking through their midst towards the main room. Huh. Darkeel exclaimed. Haha, I told you, Darkeel, Fiona voiced out with a victorious look. Darkeel squinted his eyes and walked in along with Fiona. But squad leader, what do you mean by depends on the situation? Darkeel asked. On a normal speed level, she's faster. If I decide to crank it up, I can go faster than her highest speed for some time, Gustav explained. What? Fiona exclaimed with a look of disbelief. Heh, I told you, Fiona, squad leader, is faster. Darkeel had a smug look on his face as he voiced out while folding his arms. Squad leader, I do not agree. Am faster, Fiona said with a tone of confidence. Gustav smiled at this response. Having the power to fly doesn't necessarily make you faster, he stated. Then how about a race? Fiona suggested. Are you sure? Your confidence level might plunge afterward. Gustav smirked after voicing out. Yes, let's do it, she responded confidently as well. She had decided not to back down on this, even though Gustav's tone of confidence made her feel a bit drawn aback. Flying was her thing, and she wanted to show that there was something Gustav could still lose at. Right now, Gustav looked perfect in their eyes, and there was literally nothing he wasn't skilled at. Fiona felt like if she was able to beat him in this, her morale would be boosted a bit. All right then, we'll have our race after we complete the mission, Gustav stated. Fiona smiled and nodded. All right now, I will reveal my plans to get hold of the Rutilia governing body we're after, Gustav voiced out. About 30 minutes later, Gustav concluded his meeting with both of them. He had let them in on his plans to infiltrate and find out information on the movements of the group so they could keep ambushing them. During the phase where this was ongoing, he would find the location of Chief Tim Olton, the governing body from the Rutilia group that they were told to assassinate. Gustav reckoned it might take some time to find out the location, which is why they'd spend the time in between ambushing the Rutilia troops and weakening them further. They couldn't storm the Rutilia's bases because, unlike Sahel hideouts, these were actually official bases. They weren't structured to be in hiding, so they were built quite standard with a lot of Rutilia's personnel stationed around the premises every time. There were only 2 of their main bases in the city, so the number of officials they had was a staggering one. Even though they couldn't ambush them, this made it easy for Gustav to collect information since there were only 2 main spots. After the trio had decided on their next move, they went on to rest and prepare. In the meantime, Fiona and Darkeel didn't have to go anywhere, but Gustav would have to be moving around and gathering information without getting caught since he would be infiltrating. Gustav left the other 3 to remain in the groups they enlisted to and keep reducing the opposing side's strength. In a flash, 1 week had gone by again, and the current week would make it 1 month since they had embarked on this mission. During this 1 week, Gustav and the others had achieved the second step of the third objective. At this moment, all 3 opposing forces siding with the world government, the Zalabans, Lanzis, and Rutilias, had the number of their troops cut down by up to half along with resources. With the rate at which they were losing forces, no citizen was willing to get recruited as a troop member there anymore. Even though there was a lot of hunger due to the ongoing civil war, people still valued their lives, especially when the other groups who weren't suffering as many casualties were still open to recruiting troops. The state of the civil war had dampened a lot due to this, and battles had been decreasing in number lately. The city was slowly starting to turn peaceful, and it wasn't as bad as it used to be in the past when Gustav arrived here. During the last 1 week, Gustav had weakened the forces of the Rutilias and finally managed to find Chief Tim Olton. Just a day ago, He successfully and gruesomely assassinated Chief Tim Olton amid the protection of several guards more powerful than he was. Chief Tim Olton was not so cautious as the other leader Gustav killed the first time. The lack of caution made it even easier for Gustav to infiltrate and do the deed. Once again, this caused a big uproar within the group, and they sent out forces to investigate and go after the killer. Chapter 651. However, they could not find traces of Gustav no matter how much they tried. Gustav was always perfect at escaping. For the past 24 hours, they were not able to catch on to him. Although he had to travel to the far end of the city, which was where the last region was located, to find him, Gustav didn't mind since he completed the objective. The Rotilias were also trying to keep it under the wraps, just like the Zalabans that they had lost one of their 3 governing bodies. Each group didn't want the other to know that a key member of their group was gone, which also meant reducing their assets and overall strength. Hiding this information even gave room for Gustav to exploit his options. If both groups had made this information public, the third group would catch on to the fact that the governing bodies were being targeted. However, since it wasn't revealed and the 2 groups affected acted like nothing was wrong, the other group would not be alarmed as well. The only reason why the leaders of all 3 groups held emergency meetings occasionally was due to the fact that they were starting to lose to the other 3 groups. This made them wary, causing the leaders to hold meetings and make plans. But even with this, none of the other 2 revealed their losses. Although the last group, Landses, was starting to suspect something after both groups mentioned that they couldn't input a lot of resources into the battles like they used to. They had all lost a lot of manpower, but the Landses still held on because they still had all their 3 governing bodies. Meanwhile, the Zalabans and Rotilias were starting to think it was high time they hung the flag up, but they didn't know how to put this out there. To balance things, Gustav was already making plans on how to assassinate the third person on their list, Chief Faltambrad. This was the name of one of the governing bodies in the Landses group. The Landses had several bases across the city, so Gustav knew it would take some time before he could gather the information needed and make plans to get rid of him. At the moment, this was all that was left for them to do. The moment Chief Faltambrad was successfully assassinated, it would mean they had completed their mission here. Gustav had called back the rest of them, and currently, everyone was together waiting for Gustav's next command. He had dealt with the other 2 himself, so he couldn't tell if he would need them or not. However, he was glad everyone was here at the moment. If the final objective was a tough one where Head need their assistance, they'd be available. About 3 more days went by, and as expected, Gustav made use of this time frame to dig up a lot of information about where Chief Faltambrad could be staying. Even though the city was quite small, it still homed over 200,000 people, so finding just this one place was still not an easy task. Gustav also shared his squad across multiple regions where the Landses bases were situated to gather information. On the 4th day, Mill communicated to Gustav about a piece of information he heard which related to Chief Faltan. This information wasn't about where Chief Faltan resided in particular. Instead, it was about where he was last seen. Everyone from Gustav's squad had a copy of Chief Faltan's facial holographic display, so each of them had been sneaking around and asking about him in the location Gustav went to. None of them had any luck since, till this day when Mill found out where he was last seen. Mill was currently in Region 2, so the instant the information about where Chief Faltan's last seen was relayed to him, he began traveling towards there. Gustav was around somewhere in the middle of the city, so making his way down to Region 2 would take some time. Gustav communicated with the rest of the squad and told them to meet him at Region 2 as well. Now that they had a clue, investigating together would make things faster. In a couple of hours, Gustav arrived in Region 2 and instantly moved towards the rendezvous point he set up for them. Mill and Fiona were already waiting for his arrival and the arrival of the rest. They stayed within a coffee shop on the 2nd floor of a 10-story building within a public area. The others were still on their way, so Fiona engaged both of them in small talk while they waited. "It's been years since I was in the MBO camp. You'll still go on morning routines?" she asked. "Last time I checked, yeah. I've been away for over 3 months now, so things could have changed," Gustav responded. "Things never change in the MBO camp," Mill chipped in with a reminiscing look. "Back then, my set would spend only 3 hours scaling through the landscapes, Fiona decided to brag a little as she voiced out with a smile. We only spent around 2 hours when we got used to it, Mill voiced out as well. Oh nice, Gustav responded to both of them and nodded. What about your set? Fiona decided to ask. She knew his set was the youngest in the MBO camp at the moment, but she was still looking to see if they were better than hers back then when she was still in the MBO camp. It takes some time to get used to, so I don't think any of them can go lower than the 2 hours mark yet, Mill said with a dismissive expression. Gustav stared at him and smiled. Even Angie doesn't spend any less than 1 hour 30 minutes scaling through the 5 landscapes, Gustav revealed. What? Are you serious? Fiona couldn't believe her ears. Yes. She's a special class, so it's normal for her to be that fast, especially with her original bloodline even though bloodlines are sealed at the time. Chapter 652. Yes. She's a special class, so it's normal for her to be that fast, especially with her original bloodline even though bloodlines are sealed at the time, Gustav responded. Mill also couldn't believe his ears. He hadn't returned to camp in a while since he was already in his final year, so he had no idea that the first years were currently known as the mixed bloods with the highest potential since the start of the MBO camp. How is that even possible? He muttered with a disbelieving look, remembering the times when he was a first year as well. It was very difficult to scale through those landscapes with sealed bloodlines, so he couldn't understand how someone would spend such a short period scaling through every single one of them. Wait, by the way, you said that she isn't the fastest in completing the morning routine, is she? This realization dawned on Fiona as she asked. No, she isn't, Gustav answered. E comes in quicker, so does Chad and Eldris. It takes them about an hour to complete theirs, Gustav added. An hour? Impossible. The reaction on their faces was truly filled with shock as Fiona and Mill voiced out. You still haven't mentioned yourself. How long do you take to complete it? Mill inquired about who could be the fastest, if not Gustav. He'll leave that to your imagination, Gustav said with a dismissive tone. Their reactions were already over the top, so he didn't want to reveal that he spent around 40 minutes scaling through those landscapes, and the only person that came close to reaching his speed was Elevera. Now that he thought of it, Elevera would train harder and get stronger in camp. When he returned, he might not even be the number 1 anymore, and a spar might be required. Gustav smiled as he thought of that. He was interested in throwing hands with Elevera anyways, so it might be a good opportunity. Thinking about how Elevera's strength was close to his without any support like the system, Gustav knew she was truly talented, and there was even a chance she would be given her first mission ahead of time. It was quite guaranteed that she wouldn't be spending up to 4 years training in camp before she became a full-fledged MBO officer. The special class cadets would, in fact, not spend that long since the MBO could see how much potential they had. Just as Fiona was about to ask something again, a hover car arrived in front of the coffee shop. They're here. Before anyone came out of it, Gustav already voiced out. Mill and Fiona looked towards the window pane area and focused on the hover car parked down after hearing Gustav say that. Darkheel, Felgro, and Ilden came out of the hover car in the next moment and looked up at the second-floor area of the building. Darkheel smiled as he spotted the 3 of them sitting around a table close to the window area. They moved in and joined Gustav and the others around the table. Hey, how come you 3 came together? Fiona asked with a look of suspiciousness. You won't believe I coincidentally jammed into the 2 while driving along the ridge that led to Region 15, Darkheel responded. And both of us met each other on a crossroad in Region 22 and decided to continue traveling together, Ilden voiced out while gesturing at Felgro. The squad laughed at it after hearing that, as it seemed like a string of coincidences. After the small exchange of words, Gustav finally addressed them. Let's listen to the info Mill has for us, he stated. Mill brought out a small spherical metallic object with a small diamond in the middle. Truant. As he activated it, the device shot out rays of light, which formed a holographic image of a man sitting in what seemed to look like a booth. He was dressed in a scarlet and blue-colored outfit with a black flame mark on its back area. He looked quite meek with his oblong-shaped facial feature and white hair. This is a place within Region 2 called the Mug House, Mill narrated as the picture displayed changed into another. In the next picture, this man still sat in the booth, but it had been taken from another angle, and one could now see that a person sat in front of him, and a board game was placed on the table in their midst. This person looked like a young girl whose jaw hung slightly loose and shifted to the side with spiky metallic-looking objects protruding from her chin area. She seemed disabled, and the man in front of her had a smile on his face as he played the board game with her. It's a place where people with untreatable disabilities due to genetic disorder are kept and properly taken care of by employed medical workers, Mill kept explaining. At the same time, the picture changed, showing other booths where the man could also be seen playing board games with others as well. The different people in the pictures with him all had genetic disabilities of some kind that not only made them weird-looking but also prevented them from being able to stand, sit, eat, close their eyes, or do some normal things that people would be able to. This man was Chief Brad Valtan. I made my research on his appearance here and found out that he comes to this place once a month to visit these genetically disabled people, Mill continued explaining. Also, I found out that he finds this place. The care being given to those people is only maintained because of the funds he gives, Mill added while darting his eyes around to see the expressions of everyone. Everyone tried to retain their poker faces, but it was quite obvious that they were affected by this piece of information. Only Gustav's facial expression remained unchanging as he stared at projection while waiting for Mill to continue with the dissemination of information. Chapter 653. After the brief silence, Mill resumed speaking. I tried to trace his residence from there, but I couldn't. It's like he leaves no traces behind whenever he leaves. Mill stopped talking after getting to this point. The table was turned silent once again for some time, as everyone turned to stare at Gustav waiting for him to say something. You couldn't track him? Gustav muttered with a contemplative expression. He proceeded to bring out a device and tapped on it. An holographic map of Region 2 was displayed, and he proceeded to zoom in on it. If I am right, you're referring to this location, Gustav said while pointing at a particular part of the map that seemed to be close to the outskirts of a small forest area. Yes, Mill nodded. Then the areas to search would be here, 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 here and here. Gustav instantly pinpointed places on the map he suspected might be Chief Brad Valtan's residence. The areas he had pinpointed were roughly calculated by Gustav, but with his intelligence Gustav was sure that one of these 5 places would be the area where he resided in. The others looked at the areas and realized that they were a bit secluded from normal areas, and there were direct routes up ahead which would easily lead to the mug house. Based on the 2 Gustav had assassinated so far, the governing bodies like to stay in secluded area filled with luxury. Based on the maps, none of these areas looked luxurious, but they still seemed a bit secluded. However, Gustav could tell there was something different about this one, so he wasn't all too keen on the luxury, which was why these areas were suspected. We're 5 so we can spread out to investigate each area, Fiona voiced out. Precisely, Gustav responded. Darky'll check this area. Fiona here. Gustav began to share the areas where each person was supposed to check. After he was done, he gave a command. Don't act without sending out a communication first. The moment any of you find him, let me know first, Gustav voiced out. They all nodded in response and stood to their feet to leave this coffee shop. Gustav moved over to the counter area and dropped a wad of cash on it before waving at and turning around to leave as well. The entire coffee shop had been empty this whole time with just the 5 of them within. When Gustav picked this place as the meeting spot, he told Mill to book the place for only the 5 of them to stay and chat. They found out how much money the owner made daily and proposed to double it if the shop was closed for normal customers and only open for them. The owner agreed and also left them alone to meet in seclusion. As they arrived outside, Fiona called out to Gustav to speak with him in private. They moved towards the side while the others began moving towards the location they were sent to inspect. Are you sure we should kill this one? Fiona asked. That's what the mission says, so why not? Gustav responded with a question of his own. Squad leader, I'm sure you heard the part where Officer Mill mentioned that Chief Brad is the reason why a home for the genetically disabled is still running. Fiona voiced out. Yexo? What about it? Gustav's expression remained unchanging as he responded with a question again. Fiona's mouth hung open out of speechless seeing Gustav's uncaring attitude. She felt he'd be a little bothered by it, but from the looks of things he didn't care. She recalled the time where they destroyed the main hideout of the Red Jackets. The Vulcans had appeared there, and Gustav didn't mind going on with the initial plan of obliterating the entire place with the planted explosives. At this point, she realized Gustav might just be as cold and uncaring as his teacher, the one and only Demon Queen. This put a bit of fear in her heart, as she hoped history won't be repeatedly based on the tales she had heard of the Demon Queen. But all those genetically disabled, what's going to happen to them if we kill him? Fiona voiced out with a big sigh. The mission comes first before anything else. If we do successfully complete the mission, the war ends and people stop dying unnecessarily. Gustav responded with a dismissive tone. Is there no other way? We can just leave the disabled without their source of care, Fiona asked. You come up with a good alternative, and I might agree to it. If you don't have one, you might as well keep quiet and proceed with the task, Gustav voiced out bluntly before proceeding to move forward, leaving Fiona standing in place with a bothered expression. After some time, she also took her leave and began moving towards where Gustav assigned her. Gustav picked the area within the small forest since the mug house was located on the outskirts of the forest. Swoosh! He sped towards that location with speed. Are you truly going to assassinate him? Not that I care, but you seem to be on the tenterhooks about this one, the system voiced out in his head as he sped towards the location. He has to go for all this to end. I care about completing the mission than anything else. Not for the MBO, but for the continuation of my plans. I don't care about anything else, Gustav responded dismissively. Did you forget I live in you? You can lie to everyone else, but not me. The girlish voice of the system resounded in his head with a snicker. Gustav, I'm not lying about anything. You're hesitant because you're finally seeing someone with power who is genuinely doing some good, and according to your mission, you have to kill such a person? The system stated. For all we know, it could just be a ruse. Just because it looks like he's good doesn't mean he is, Gustav responded back internally with a scoff. But you know very well that those who pretend to do good display their acts for the world to see, while those who do it for the sake of truly doing good don't expose their good acts. Chapter 654. But you know very well that those who pretend to do good display their acts for the world to see, while those who do it for the sake of truly doing good don't expose their good acts, the system voiced out in his head. Gustav thought for a few moments about this and realized it was mostly accurate. Sometimes publicizing good acts was just a way to get praise from the masses. It's more genuine when good is done secretly and not in the open just to get praises. This still doesn't mean anything. I'll make my decision after investigating him, Gustav decided, and the system stopped speaking after this. After a few minutes of sprinting around, Gustav arrived at the mug house, a C-shaped 10-story tall building. It was a bit distant from the last street in the area and positioned right outside the small forest area. Gustav scrutinized the entire building for a few moments before going around it. The forest was right behind. Swoosh! He ran forward into the forest, leaving afterimages around. 30 minutes into looking around the forest, Gustav had already gone round 3 times. He was hoping there was something he had missed because he hadn't come across any structure he had expected so far. Heading out of the forest on the south side led to Region 3. The area there bordered on Region 2 and the next. Heading out, the forest on the west side led to a riverbank. Gustav even ran across the river's surface, reaching the other end and observing the entire vicinity using God eyes. But he couldn't find anything. The eastern area led to another part of the region, so everything was pointless. Gustav was still hoping he missed something, so he still kept circling around these areas. The squad decided to meet back at the coffee shop in the next 2 hours. All 6 of them moved there as quickly as they could and sat around the same table they did earlier. Any progress? Gustav asked. All 5 of them shook their heads in response. I couldn't find anything around that area even after extensively searching for close to 3 hours, Fiona voiced out. Same. The others voiced out as well. Gustav held his chin, seemingly in deep thought. I also couldn't find anything. No secret hideout. Nothing. This is weird, Gustav muttered. Are there be other places on the maps that we could check? Darkiel asked. Sure, there are so many other locations within this region, but the others fall in standard compared to where a governing body would live, Gustav voiced out. Could it be possible that Chief Fault Ann may be living a simple type of lifestyle? Ilden stated with a contemplative expression as well. This is only possible based on the type of character he is. Still, we can't say for sure that someone who holds such an amount of power would even be allowed to live that type of lifestyle, since he would have enemies that might go after him if they saw a loophole, Fiona said with a logical point of view. He already does some humble deeds that others in positions of power don't, so we can't completely rule out the fact that he might have chosen to live a simple lifestyle, Gustav voiced out as well. His mind was open to different points of view, which made him see things better. What should we do, squad leader? Mill asked. Initially, Gustav was so sure of his deductions based on the other governing bodies he assassinated, but this one happened to be different and had proven him wrong. Each of you will check different parts of the region and do an extensive search of the places you are meant to cover for signs of Chief Valtan, Gustav voiced out as he brought out the map area and began to share them to different parts. Unlike before, where it'd only take them a few to scan an area, this time, they were tasked with bigger areas since Gustav decided they should investigate every part of the region. He was giving everyone 24 hours to check and report back to him if they found anything. Everyone left the coffee shop once again and went their separate ways. Just like before, it was empty since they paid for the entire day. The shop owner was a bit bothered seeing these unknown faces having a meeting in their shop, but the money had been received, and he didn't regret accepting it in this period where there were barely any customers. Gustav also began his scan across the region after picking the parts he was going to investigate. Time moved very quickly as nightfall arrived after a few hours. Since all 6 of them were in different places, they all decided to rest in the areas where they were situated. Gustav contacted each of them, and they disclosed that they were yet to find anything he found troublesome. Gustav wasn't slow like the others. At the moment, he and Fiona had finished scanning through the areas they were supposed to. Gustav didn't find anything, neither did Fiona. Gustav was only waiting for the others to complete theirs so he would know if they had to begin searching another region. Each of them had technological equipment in their possession which made it easier to spy on different structures within the region, but the region was pretty large. Gustav didn't sleep the entire night. He kept checking and scanning around the place. During the day, he got reports from them once again, and each person revealed they had checked every single structure situated with the area Gustav assigned them to and didn't find anything. This brought Gustav back as he started believing that Chief Valtan was probably not in this region. On his way back to the coffee shop to meet the others, Gustav came across the mug house again and decided to pause in front of it. If Chief Valtan is truly living somewhere simple, maybe we didn't consider some factors, Gustav muttered as a thought of realization came to his mind. He leaped across the air, scaling past the 10 floors of the structure in nearly an instant as he landed on the rooftop. Chapter 655. He leaped across the air, scaling past the 10 floors of the structure in nearly an instant, and landed on the rooftop. Gustav instantly spread out his perception, covering the entire vicinity and all 10 floors of the building in a few moments. At the same time, he proceeded to activate God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. His vision turned red as he stared down and saw through the floors one after the other. Gustav controlled the see-through ability of the God Eyes in such a way that he scanned one floor after the other. He could see the place crawling with the genetically disabled. They were free to wander within the internal structure of the place. However, none of them felt the need to go out since the world probably didn't treat them well, especially when some of them couldn't move because of their genetic disabilities. Some were even a danger to other people due to their occasional uncontrollable outbursts, but this place was well structured, and procedures were put in place to prevent such happenings. Some with more severe genetic conditions were in their room being tended to by medical staff, while some were playing games or engaging in one activity or the other. It seemed like quite the lovable place due to the safe vibe it exuded. Gustav continued scanning each floor one after the other. The rooms, the offices, the staff, the toilet, bathroom, and every single space within without missing one. As he approached the bottom floors, Gustav spotted something in the middle area of the 4th floor. This floor was already a weird one since Gustav couldn't find any genetically disabled on this one. Only 1 or 2 staff members would occasionally arrive here and go back, so Gustav thought it was maybe a staff room. The middle area of the structure where there was a curve was completely secluded. As Gustav scanned around the room, He found out why. His eyes slightly widened in realization as he spotted a familiar figure sitting in a cross-legged position in front of a small bed. "I found him," Gustav voiced out through the communication device. The others all across the region in different locations heard Gustav through the communication device and instantly stopped whatever they were doing at the time. "Squad leader, where?" Fiona was the first to ask. "Somewhere we never thought he'd be," Gustav voiced out while squinting his eyes. "The Mug House." The moment he said that, their eyes widened in disbelief. "He was in the Mug House this whole time?" Mills stated from the other end with a disbelieving tone. "From the looks of things, he lives here in a small space all by himself." "Truly a humble setting," Gustav said while looking around the room. Besides the bed, there was a poster on the wall and a kitchen, bathroom, as well as a small living room. This looked like the kind of place a person who had just moved out of their parents' house and starting real adult life would rent. "Squad leader, we're coming," Darkeel voiced out. The others began to make their way towards the Mug House as they heard Darkeel voice that out. "He may already be dead before you lots arrive here," Gustav responded and disconnected the communication. Fiona's expression changed as her face squeezed up a bit after hearing that. She wanted to connect back to Gustav and ask him not to kill Chief Brad, but she knew very well Gustav would only do what he wanted, so it would be pointless. Purplish wings sprouted out from her back and flapped once with intensity. Fuwum, fierce winds blasted across the surroundings, sweeping up dust and forcing people to the side. Fiona's body ascended across the air like a rocket, zooming off into the sky. While everyone headed to the Mug House, Gustav moved towards the curved middle part of the rooftop and approached the ledge in front. He looked down at the ground, which was a far distance away, but this was nothing compared to the heights he had scaled. He turned around, standing on the ledge with just his toes area, pushing one leg backward. Fwyi, Gustav's body descended with speed along the side of the building while facing it. The moment his body reached the windowpane area of the 4th floor, he activated Hover. Hover has been activated. His body paused in midair, causing him to float right in front of a closed window. 9. The countdown began as Gustav proceeded to conjure an atomic blade. Skrayev, he pierced right through and slashed in a rectangular format as quickly as he could. Sheesh. 7. The rectangular-shaped glass pane fell out the window pane, and Gustav proceeded to catch it before it could fall towards the ground. 6. Deactivating the atomic blade, Gustav reached out and grabbed hold of the sides from the hole he had cut. Pulling himself forward, his entire body went through the hole, and he arrived within a small corridor. 3. He deactivated Hover at this point and descended towards the floor. Silent advancement has been activated. He began walking forward along this silent corridor. Besides him earlier was a door that led to the exit of this particular floor, which meant that right ahead was the place where Chief Brad was residing. Gustav remembered exactly where to go from what he had seen above. He arrived in front of a door and could already sense the presence within. He touched the door and the walls by the sides and was instantly able to tell how sturdy they were. Gustav's eyes glowed a milky color as he conjured 2 long atomic blades radiating with more energy than normal. They sucked up even the air around them and caused a weird force of attraction around Gustav. Raising both hands up, Gustav's arms transformed into that of the boar, becoming extremely muscular, brown, and large. KRRYHH. He slashed out in an X format with intensity. The atomic blades tore right through the door with the amount of force used, disintegrating the properties the door was made of. Chapter 656. Bam! He kicked forward and blasted through what was left of the door. Walking through the room, he spotted Chief Brad Voltan still cross-legged on the floor right in front of his bed. Gustav had already caused a ruckus trying to get in, and the small room was already in disarray. But Chief Brad Voltan still remained seated on the floor with his eyes closed like nothing had happened. Gustav walked forward and stood behind him with a slightly confused look as his arms went back to normal and the atomic blades disappeared. This wasn't the reaction he was expecting. Chief Brad was still unbothered as he sat there like he couldn't sense the presence of the perpetrator in the room. "Welcome." After a brief moment of silence, he spoke while opening his eyes. "Welcome? I'm here to kill you, And you're welcoming me? Gustav voiced out with a low tone of confusion. I know, Chief Brad said while slowly turning around to face Gustav. If so, why the hospitality? Gustav asked. Death comes to us all. It's inescapable. Since it's my time, why not embrace it instead of running from it? It is, after all, sweet relief from the burdens of remaining alive. A warm smile appeared on Chief Brad's face as he voiced out. Gustav was stunned, speechless by these words, and kept staring at Chief Brad for a few moments trying to read him. He couldn't sense any form of malice or hidden motive. It was quite easy for Gustav to tell when a person wasn't genuine if he came into contact with the person, so he could tell that this man truly wasn't scared of death. Burdens of remaining alive? What burdens could a person such as yourself possibly have? You have power and wealth, Gustav questioned with a slightly doubtful gaze after reasoning the words Chief Brad has spoken. Oh, child, power and wealth doesn't exterminate every negative issue. You won't understand, but one day you will, Chief Brad responded with a profound tone. Why don't you have a seat? They'll let you take my life if it serves a purpose. A purposeless death wouldn't be fun, Chief Brad proposed to Gustav with a slight chuckle after seeing his expression. I'm cool with standing, Gustav regained his poker face and responded. Are you sure? I have tea brewing. Do you want some? It soothes the nerves, Chief Brad said while staring at the area that led to the kitchen. I'm here to kill you. Stop trying to serve me tea. Gustav couldn't understand why, but something about this whole situation annoyed him. He had never been met with such a reaction when trying to kill someone before. Oh, okay. But I do want to know why I'm dying today. Do you mind telling a doomed man the reason for his death? Chief Brad asked. It's confidential. I have no choice but to end your life here, Gustav responded. I see. So long as it serves a purpose, I don't really care anyway, Chief Brad said while standing to his feet. Skyish, Gustav conjured an atomic blade in his right hand as he and Chief Brad stared at each other for a few moments. The old with a smile of acceptance and the young with a poker face and a slight look of confusion. Your eyes reflect pain. Did you go through a traumatic experience in the past? Chief Brad inquired. Doesn't matter. Will you stop talking? Gustav voiced out. Ah, I see you did. Sorry, child. The world is not a fair place, and nothing anyone can say will change what happened, Chief Brad stated. If you would let me, don't let the hate consume you. I can tell you were once kind. Remember this, displaying kindness from time to time doesn't make you weak. Neither is it a sin or a stain on your personality. Still do what you wish to if you feel it's right, Chief Brad voiced out lengthily. His words were slowly getting through to Gustav, and he was slowly starting to rethink his decision on whether or not to kill Chief Brad. Oh no, don't hesitate to kill me. If you don't, you'll just get killed by someone else anyway. Chief Brad noticed what was happening and voiced out. I already know what's going on in the city. I heard from my sources about the death of the other two and the reduction in battles. The war is coming to an end. It should never have started in the first place, and I know my death would help in putting a stop to it. So do what you have to do, Chief Brad smiled. Gustav's eyes shone more unwillingness at this point. He didn't confirm nor dispute Chief Brad's assumptions, which were clearly correct. He slowly raised his hand with the atomic blade still in his grasp. What's going to happen to all the people here if I kill you? Gustav asked while pointing the atomic blade at him. Oh, you don't have to worry about that. I've poured in enough funds to last them for up to 100 years. In my death, if they eventually run out of funds to keep this place running, I'm sure someone else will rise to take up the mantle. The world never runs out of good people, Chief Brad stated with a tone of certainty. All right, Gustav responded with an unwilling tone. This was the first time he felt so compelled to keep someone that was supposed to be killed alive. Come on, there's no more time to waste. Chief Brad hurried him up. Gustav raised his hand high up, with the blade in his grasp, and hacked down with force. All 5 squad members were already close to the mug house at this point, but Fiona was still the first to arrive there even though her location was the farthest. The sounds of flapping wings reverberated across the place as a purplish streak bolted across the sky and paused right about the 10-story structure. Chapter 657. Fiona swerved around the building, looking for an entry point from above. Knowing Gustav, she was sure he wouldn't have gone in through the front door. Fiona's eyes squinted as she spotted the gap in the window pane on the 4th floor. She instantly delved down with speed, flying through the hole in the window pane. "I hope he's not dead yet," Fiona said internally as she flew within the corridor, causing winds to spread across the place. After spotting the broken-through door, she landed on the floor as her wings rescinded. She slowly walked through the door as she spotted Gustav's figure in front. His back was facing her as he stood in place. "Squad leader," Fiona voiced out, causing Gustav to slowly turn around. Her eyes widened as she spotted the decapitated head in Gustav's hand dripping with fresh blood. It was that of Chief Bradvaltan. A decapitated smiling head. "Mission complete," Gustav voiced out as he slowly placed the head on the floor. "Squad leader, why?" Fiona seemed quite disappointed as she voiced out and turned speechless. Gustav stared at her with a cold look. "Did you forget the details of the mission?" He voiced out. "Yes. I mean, no. But..." Fiona couldn't find words to express herself as she stared at the blood-soaked floor. At this point, the others arrived within the room as well. They came in through the door one after the other and stared at the bloody scene. They realized they arrived late, and Gustav had truly assassinated Chief Brad just as he said he would. "We're leaving," Gustav voiced out while moving forward. They parted ways for Gustav to pass through as they kept staring at the apartment for a few more moments before turning around to follow him. The squad moved back to the coffee shop with Gustav. The alarm systems of the building had already gone off, so they couldn't remain in the mug house. There was a high chance that even the other governing bodies had no idea that Chief Brad was staying in such a place, but now everyone would know. A small item placed on the side of the wall in Chief Brad's apartment fell off as the sign of a blood-stained handprint appeared on it. "The mission is complete. They'll contact the base and let them know our work here is done," Gustav stated. "Good job, everyone," he added. They all nodded with smiles on their faces and even shook each other hands with joyous looks, even though the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Fiona wasn't happy that Chief Brad was just assassinated like that, but she understood how missions worked, so she couldn't hold a grudge against Gustav. She even realized that she was letting her sentimentality get the better of her, which wasn't good for a person in a military-like organization. They all realized that in the end, Gustav's decision was for the better since it would help the situation of the city. The Civil War had gone on for over 5 months already, and it would set back the city's economy by a lot. Lives had been lost and assets destroyed. Gustav proceeded to contact the base of the news, and they began preparing an extraction team for them outside the city. The mission was to be completed in 2 months, but Gustav and his squad completed it in 1 month and a few days. This was a 4-star mission completed, so everyone was glad that this would add up to their accomplishments, which would assist in making them climb up the ranks faster. In the meantime, all that was left for them to do was rest and maybe look around the region before they finally left this city tomorrow. This was where everything started for Gustav, so he had come to hold a kind of sentimental feeling towards the city. He had completed 2 missions in 1 location. One thing he was glad about was the fact that it wouldn't be plagued by destruction anymore, so maybe it would look more beautiful than it currently did after everything destroyed had been rebuilt. 2 weeks later, Gustav sat in the living room where he and Miss Amy, along with Red Shadow, stayed within the second base. A small round object was in his palm, and he proceeded to tap the surface. Truant. A projection of Miss Amy appeared in his line of sight, and she began speaking. After 5 minutes, the recorded projection stopped, and Gustav sighed. He had replayed this projection about 5 times already in the past, and was replaying it again. "Sorry, Miss Amy, but I really do need to check on Boss Danzo. It's been too long since I heard from him," Gustav voiced out with a slightly guilty tone. What Miss Amy had mentioned on the projection was information on where she was at the moment and what she was doing. She wanted Gustav to join her after he got back from the Lialuk City mission, but he had other plans. Gustav had been in the second base for up to 2 weeks due to the meetings he had been having with the high-ranking officers here and getting the rewards from completing the mission. It turned out, after giving reports of the whole event, the mission was recategorized as a 5-star mission. This made it 2 5-star missions that Gustav had completed so far. There was also the event where some officers tried to sneak Sahil out of the base and were caught due to Gustav's release of information to Miss Amy. After Miss Amy passed across the warning to the base, which they took heed of, she also gave Gustav credit, telling them the source came from her student. They would have liked to argue that it might be inaccurate, but no one was willing to get their heads removed when they knew who they were dealing with. Getting the credit for that also boosted Gustav's rep within the MBO, since it helped them in rooting out some of the unfaithful MBO agents and stopping a criminal from escaping. Now that he was done with everything he needed to do here, it was finally time for him to leave. He could decide to take up Miss Amy's offer, which would equal another mission, but he also had the choice of taking a month or two leave after completing 2 5-star quests. The civil war in Lineage City had ended, and the groups had come together to propose a deal, leading the city together once more, so the mission served its purpose just like they planned. He already decided he was going to visit Burning Sands City after this, so he was going to stick with that. His communication device never goes through. Gustav was a little worried as he stood to his feet and brought out his communication device from his storage space. This was quite problematic as he didn't even know where head search when he arrived there. Gustav suddenly recalled something. I'm an MBO officer now. They have the biggest network spread across the earth. I could ask them to pinpoint Boss Danzo's location for me, he muttered with a chuckle, realizing he was stressing himself unnecessary. Just as Gustav was about to leave the building, his communication device began making a low beeping sound, which meant a call was coming through. He could hear the sound since the sound pads were stamped to the sides of his head behind both ears. He brought out his communication device, which shot out rays of light, displaying the name of who was trying to contact him. Speak of the devil, Boss Danzo, Gustav muttered with a smile while proceeding to pick the call. End of Volume 2. Start of a new Lifest Wiley. Next volume. Chaos ensues. Chapter 658. Do not open yet. Chapter currently being fixed. Fiona swerved around the building looking for an entry point from above. Knowing Gustav, she was sure he wouldn't have gone in through the front door. Fiona's eyes squinted as she spotted the gap in the window pane on the 4th floor. She instantly delved down with speed, flying through the hole in the window pane. I hope he's not dead yet, Fiona said internally as she flew within the corridor, causing winds to spread across the place. She landed on the floor after spotting the broken-through door as her wings rescinded. She slowly walked through the door as she spotted Gustav's figure in front. His back was facing her as he stood in place. Squad leader, Fiona voiced out, causing Gustav to slowly turn around. Her eyes widened as she spotted the decapitated head in Gustav's hand, dripping with fresh blood. It was that of Chief Brad Voltan. A decapitated, smiling head. Mission complete, Gustav voiced out as he slowly placed the head on the floor. Squad leader, why? Fiona seemed quite disappointed as she voiced out and turned speechless. Gustav stared at her with a cold look. Did you forget the details of the mission? He voiced out. Yes. I mean, no. But Fiona couldn't find words to express herself as she stared at the blood-soaked floor. At this point, the others arrived within the room as well. They came in through the door one after the other and stared at the bloody scene. They realized they arrived late and Gustav had truly assassinated Chief Brad just as he said he would. We're leaving, Gustav voiced out while moving forward. They parted ways for Gustav to pass through as they kept staring at the apartment for a few more moments before turning around to follow him. The squad moved back to the coffee shop with Gustav. The alarm systems of the building had already gone off, so they couldn't remain in the mug house. There was a high chance that even the other governing bodies had no idea that Chief Brad was staying in such a place, but now everyone would know. A small item placed on the side of the wall in Chief Brad's apartment fell off as the sign of a blood-stained hand print appeared on it. The mission is complete. They'll contact the base and let them know our work here is done, Gustav stated. Good job, everyone, he added. They all nodded with smiles on their faces and even shook each other hands with joyous looks, even though the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Fiona wasn't happy that Chief Brad was just assassinated like that, but she understood how missions worked, so she couldn't hold a grudge against Gustav. She even realized that she was letting her sentimentality get the better of her, which wasn't good for a person in a military-like organization. They all realized that in the end Gustav's decision was for the better, since it would help the situation of the city. The Civil War had gone on for over 5 months already, and it would set back the economy of the city by a lot. Lives had been lost and assets destroyed. Gustav proceeded to contact the base of the news, and they began preparing an extraction team for them outside the city. The mission was to be completed in 2 months, but Gustav and his squad completed it in 1 month and a few days. This was a 4-star mission completed, so everyone was glad that this would add up to their accomplishments, which would assist in making them climb up the ranks faster. In the meantime, all that was left for them to do was rest and maybe look around the region before they finally left this city tomorrow. This was where everything started for Gustav, so he had come to hold a kind of sentimental feeling towards the city. He had complete 2 missions in 1 location. One thing he was glad about was the fact that it wouldn't be plagued by destruction anymore, so maybe it would look more beautiful than it currently did after everything destroyed had been rebuilt. 2 weeks later, within the second base, Gustav sat in the living room where he and Miss Amy, along with Red Shadow, had stayed. A small round object was in his palm, and he proceeded to tap the surface. Truant. A projection of Miss Amy appeared in his line of sight, and she began speaking. After 5 minutes, the recorded projection stopped and Gustav sighed. He had replayed this projection about 5 times already in the past and was replaying it again. "Sorry, Miss Amy, but I really do need to check on Boss Danzo. It's been too long since I heard from him," Gustav voiced out with a slightly guilty tone. What Miss Amy had mentioned on the projection was information on where she was at the moment and what she was doing. She wanted Gustav to come join her there after he got back from the Lialuk City mission, but he had other plans. Gustav had been in the second base for up to 2 weeks due to the meetings he had been having with the high-ranking officers here and getting the rewards from completing the mission. It turned out after giving reports of the whole event, the mission was recategorized as a 5-star mission. This made it 2 5-star missions that Gustav had completed so far. There was also the event where some officers tried to sneak Sahil out of the base and were caught due to Gustav's release of information to Miss Amy. After Miss Amy passed across the warning to the base, which they took heed of, she also gave Gustav the credit, telling them the source came from her student. They would have liked to argue that it might be inaccurate, but no one was willing to get their heads removed when they knew who they were dealing with. Getting the credit for that also boosted Gustav's rep within the MBO, since it helped them in rooting out some of the unfaithful MBO agents and stopping a criminal from escaping. Now that he was done with everything he needed to do here, it was finally time for him to leave. Chapter 659. Within a bustling city shrouded in a sandy fog, a massive pearl-shaped star could be seen high up in the sky, burning with fiery and dazzling yellow flames. Even though the city was shrouded in a sandy-colored fog, it didn't hinder visuality. It only disturbed the colorization of the air, and wind could be seen moving from time to time, contrary to normal places across the world where the wind was invisible. The city was well structured with many tall buildings and good roads. Some places oozed with small fiery energy at different points, and when a vehicle in movement made contact with these points, they would disappear and appear in another location. Even though the city was quite large, it was surrounded by a massive layer of sand. Not ordinary sands, but golden-colored sands burning with yellow-colored flames. The view from above was one where the city seemed to be situated right in the middle of vast lands of flaming sands. The sands were ablaze and never stopped burning, but at the same time, they were perfectly fine and not being disintegrated. The blazing sand-covered lands were at least 4 times larger than the city situated within. This city was called Burning Sands. According to legends, during the descent of the meteors, which were suspected to be chunks and parts of the destroyed planet Humbad, a massive piece of flaming meteor fell on this part of the Earth, which was initially a desert. The entire desert was set ablaze, and the sands kept burning even when the government tried to quench the flames using such different methods. What they noticed after this continued for months was the color of the sands change. The sands became golden in color and gave off a weird energy circulation to the surroundings. The government found a way to take some pieces of these burning sands to test it and realized that it carried energy within. They found a way to harness the energy, and in the current age, the creation of healing supplements and drugs for bloodline boost came from this breakthrough. Without the proper equipment, it was impossible to even get a piece of sand and harness the energy within. So only the government could do this because a normal person would burn to ashes coming into contact with the sands. The city created within was known as one of the best places for a soothing vacation, according to many tourists. Being cascaded in the warm energy from the sands surrounding the city added to longevity and was particularly soothing to the body. It had been rumored that a lot of sick mixed bloods with one incurable ailment or the other had undergone change after visiting this city, so it usually has a lot of people trying to visit. However, Burning Sands City always limited the number of tourists visiting their city, so it was quite hard to unless you visit were lucky or had connections. This didn't mean they didn't have a high population, but compared to other well-known cities across the world, they had the smallest amount. One couldn't walk on the sands surrounding them, so the only way in and out of the city was through flight. Only within the city would one find land vehicles, and these vehicles only operated within the city. No one ever went out of the city through land vehicles unless they were trying to commit suicide because it would result in an explosion. Within the city's central airport, a young male dressed in a red jacket and jean pants could be seen walking out of the airport along with many others who had just arrived in the city as well. He had dirty blonde hair with an extremely charming face and a well-crafted jawline. His build was quite buff with a muscular 6 feet tall frame. His eyes darted across the place with a look of intrigue and sharpness. "So this is Burning Sands City," Gustav muttered as he walked at a leisurely pace while looking around. Gustav breathed in with a slight look of delight. The air sure is flavorful, he thought. He had already seen the reason why it was called Burning Sands while on the aircraft earlier. This city was literally on the other side of the earth, far from his original city, Plankton City. "Sir, over here," someone voiced out up ahead after spotting Gustav's figure. A long hovercar similar to the build of a limo, but looking even more luxurious, was waiting up ahead. "Are you the one?" Gustav asked as he arrived in front of the car. "Yes, I'm your assigned driver, Fumar. You must be Sir Gustav. Nice to meet you," the young-looking male chauffeur voiced out politely, reaching out to shake Gustav. Gustav received his handshake and voiced out, "Just Gustav is fine." After saying this, he moved into the car through the wide-open side door. "Oh, all right, Sir Gustav," Fumar voiced out as the door closed by the side, and he moved towards the front to get in. The people in the surroundings couldn't stop staring at the luxurious-looking lengthy hovercar. Whispers of how expensive it was and how Gustav was probably some rich kid could be heard from the background by people who wouldn't mind their business. Others just stared at it with admiration as it drove away and went back to their business. Gustav couldn't help but wonder what exactly was the energy from the sands, because he could feel his body taking in the energy lingering in the surroundings as he breathed in. His organs even seemed to be enjoying the energy-filled air he kept breathing in. He could tell that if he remained in this city and continued his training here, he would be so much faster and stronger than his peers. The energy from the burning sands was even said to even unlock hidden potentials, and being exposed to it has changed the internal structure of so many people, Slakovs, humans, and mixed bloods alike. Chapter 660. Gustav could tell that the reason why mixed bloods didn't come here to train was that it was hard to get access into the city, and even if they did, training couldn't be done here extensively. Also, there was no telling how it would affect their anatomy, but so far, every report about the city was quite good. Zwun, as they blazed through the streets of Burning Sands City, Gustav looked around. It was just as advanced as Plankton City, and there were some spectacular sights to see as well. The blazing checkpoints in the city were actually called dimensional stars. The moment contact was made with the dimensional stars, the object that made contact with it would be teleported to another part of the city. Plankton City had teleportation circles and rings, while Burning Sands had dimensional stars. Plankton City was more advanced since it made traveling easier for even pedestrians due to the teleportation circle. The dimensional stars only worked with a certain mass of object, and normal-looking humans/Slarkovs, mixed bloods were out of the equation. Gustav kept looking out the window at different shapes, structures, and even the floating rail up above. He spotted the massive star-shaped pearl, blazing with dazzling flames in the sky again. He had no idea what it was, but he knew it couldn't just be a pretty object. It definitely would have some kind of use, but that was of no importance right now. Gustav was more concerned with arriving at his destination to begin his search for Boss Danzo. He recalled the call he received from Boss Danzo 3 days ago. "Boss Danzo, Gustav exclaimed the moment the call connected. SKKRRYYYYRRSSSHHH, dash my boy. SKKKRRYYYSSHGHH. A. Problem. SKKKRRYYYSSHHGHH. For some reason, the communication from the other side didn't sound so clear. For every word Boss Danzo said, there would always be a glitching sound in between, which cut off part of his sentences. Boss Danzo, I can't. Can you repeat what you said? Gustav voiced out since the whole statement started to sound confusing from breaking off several times in between. SKKKRRYYYSSHHGHH. I said, SKKKRRYYYSSHHGHH. Problem. SKKKRRYYYSSHHGHH. Then suddenly, the call was disconnected. Boss Danzo? Boss Danzo? Gustav kept calling out, but there was no response. He proceeded to try connecting again, but it wasn't going through. He could tell that something was wrong somewhere because one word kept being repeated when the sentences were being cut off. Problem. After continuously trying to get back to Boss Danzo, Gustav could not do so and had to find the communication center within the second base. He asked for the last call position to be traced, and according to the tracking system, it came from Burning Sand City. Gustav sighed in relief as he confirmed that Boss Danzo was still in Burning Sands. He proceeded to ask for a more accurate lock-on position within the city, and he was pointed towards a section of the city. Taquan District, Gustav muttered as the car arrived within a particular part of the city that was filled with multiple business buildings. This area was practically a market square and was always busy, filled with people moving to and fro. According to the more accurate lock on the position of the call, this was the area where Gustav received a call from Boss Danzo. He had no idea what was going on, but he hoped Boss Danzo would be all right. Taquan District covered quite a large area since it was a business district. Still, Gustav was ready to comb through looking for Boss Danzo. However, his first plan was to settle down in one of their hotels first off before he started his endeavor. He could also meet the police to find Boss Danzo for him, but he felt his search might be more efficient than relying on them. There was no MBO base or tower in this city, but there were still MBO officers deployed here from time to keep the situations relating to mixed bloods under control. The crime rate relating to mixed bloods wasn't very high due to the city barely letting tourists come here, but it still happened occasionally. Sometimes, the mixed bloods culprits escaped with the crime due to the low number of MBO officers here. This couldn't really be blamed on the MBO since the people in power controlling the city regulated the number of officers being sent here, and also refused the MBO proposal to build a tower here, just like Plankton City. The officers being deployed here could only make do with what they had. Gustav wasn't even coming here as an officer, or he might have been denied access. He came as a tourist, and the MBO sponsored his trip because, why not? The higher-ups in the second base felt he needed the vacation after both of his accomplishments in the last few months. He could stay for as long as 2 months here before returning back to duty, but at that time, only a few weeks would be left before he returned to camp. They advised Gustav to refrain from using any destructive abilities within the city due to the uptightness of the city laws. One of the laws banned mixed bloods from battles and using bloodline abilities in public areas to ensure order. More powerful mixed bloods had the power to bring down buildings and destroy areas, so the leadership of the city wanted to avoid such things happening. The moment mixed bloods were caught exchanging attacks with abilities, they would be charged with felony. And even within secluded areas, if mixed bloods were caught battling, there would still face minor consequences. The hovercar stopped right in front of a building, 251 stories high. The building looked quite icy, colored with reflective window panes, and beautifully designed compared to the rest of the buildings in the vicinity. One could see the sign above that read, Faviola Relaxation Palace. This was the only hotel within the Taquan district. It was also one of the most luxurious hotels within the city, said to be rated 10 full stars. Chapter 661. They'll be closed by, sir, if you want to go anywhere else later? Fumar voiced out as Gustav got off the car. Fumar had given Gustav his contact information, so Gustav could call him when he felt like leaving the hotel later. Gustav knew he would probably need that since he wouldn't be really making use of his abilities within this city, But he could also tell that he might have to break a few laws later on and properly make use of his abilities if things weren't going his way. Gustav got off the car and walked towards the entry point of the hotel. "Get out of here, kids. I will contact your parents immediately if you don't leave." A loud masculine voice immediately drifted into Gustav's ears the moment he arrived at the reception area. "What's wrong with you? I paid you, didn't I? Refund my money then." A younger masculine voice stated with a tone of rebelliousness. "We don't do refunds. You and your little girlfriend, get out." The former voice resounded again. "I'm not leaving till I get my money back, you fat red pig." The younger masculine voice resounded again. Some people had already gathered around the vicinity, staring at the commotion with awestruck expressions. Even when the security tried dispersing them, they ignored them. In front of one of the counters, a man dressed in tight blue suiting with a big and round body seemed to be in a heated argument with a teenage-looking boy who seemed no older than 15 years of age. The boy had a 57 tall build, just like Indrik with scruffy black hair, while the man he was in an argument with was about 52 in height, but visible rows of fat could be seen outlined on his suit. It wasn't that the suit was tight. It just happened to be that the man was oversized. Behind the boy was a young girl who looked like she was no older than 14 or 15 years of age. Her eyes shone embarrassment and shyness as she looked around and spotted the people watching them. She tugged on the boy's shirt while looking down with an embarrassed expression. "Let's leave," she kept voicing out, but he ignored her. The boy kept on arguing with the man who happened to be a staff here due to not being refunded after paying for a room. The man who obviously refused this youngster the room also stopped the workers behind the counter from refunding him. Conflict. "It never gets old," Gustav said internally as she stood behind a queue on one of the counter's 3 places towards the side. "No, it never. Especially when you're around," the system voiced out in his head. "Hey, what do you mean by that?" Gustav stated in his head with a tone of annoyance. The system ignored his question and answered with a light giggle instead. "TCH?" Gustav moved forward and arrived in front of the counter after the people ahead of him were done. "My room has been booked already," he began explaining to one of the receptionists who tapped on the holographic display in front of her, checking for Gustav's information. "If you and your little girlfriend want to commit immorality, go to another place. We don't allow such acts between kids here." "Who are you calling kids? If you don't let us in, then refund my damn money, you pig." "Leave before I tell the security to drag you both out of here." "I dare you to do it and suffer the consequences. Refund my money." This organization doesn't do refunds." They seem to still be in a heated argument. Meanwhile, Gustav got his room number and key card. After being given the directions on how to head to his room, he turned towards the left and began walking forward. He was walking right towards the area where the whole argument was going down. Unlike everyone who avoided that area in particular, Gustav walked through with a poker face like all the scene playing out wasn't even happening. As he passed by the side of the two and arrived right beside the young girl, he heard her voice out the boy's name again. "Damien, let's leave." She voiced this out while pulling his sleeves, which affected him, pointing at the man. The boy suddenly swung his elbow backwards subconsciously to free his grasp, which in turn headed for the girl's eyes. Gustav turned towards the side with speed and reached out to grab the elbow right when it was only a few centimeters from her face. The boy exclaimed as he felt the grip on his elbow and turned around. He spotted the dirty blonde hair, a stunning-looking young man behind him, and felt his face was a bit familiar. The girl already flinched backward, but she knew if it wasn't for Gustav grabbing onto the elbow, her eyes might have sunk in by now. "Be careful, kid," Gustav voiced out as he let go of his elbow. "Thank you," the girl voiced out in appreciation. "Oh my goodness, Siri, I'm so sorry," Damien apologized as he realized what would have happened. "It's okay, let's just leave," she responded shyly. She couldn't handle all the glares shooting at them from the people in the vicinity. He nodded in response and turned around to give the fat man a piercing glare. "Are you sticking up for them, mister? Why don't you learn to mind your business?" The fat man in front voiced out just as Gustav moved to the side to leave. Gustav, who was already leaving before, paused his feet as he heard that. I was gonna let it slide before, but now?" Gustav muttered as he turned around and began walking towards the man with a cold look. Since you said that, how about I stick up for them just like you assumed? Gustav's face looked so cold at the moment that the fat man subconsciously shrank back when they made eye contact. Refund the kids cash since you ain't giving them a room. Don't be a thief, Gustav voiced out while looking down on the 52 fat man. We cannot do that, sir. It is against. The man suddenly turned respectful as he began voicing out, but Gustav cut him short before he could complete his sentence. It's not a request. It's a demand, Gustav voiced out before grabbing hold of the man's collar with his right hand and lifting him up to reach his eye level. Gasp! The people in the vicinity had looks of awe as they stared at the way Gustav lifted him up effortlessly. Refund it, Gustav voiced out again. I could sue you for. The fat man was speaking again when Gustav cut him short. It would be very unwise to test my patience. Do you want to see which one comes first? Gustav asked. What? The fat man, who was still kicking in midair due to still being lifted, had a confused expression on his face as he voiced out. Gustav leaned closer to his left ear and whispered close to it, your death or the arrival of the cops. You want to test out which one comes first? Chapter 662. The fat man instantly froze with fear as chills spread across his spine. Gustav's tone induced so much fear in him that he involuntarily shivered. There didn't seem to be any form of hesitation in his voice. Even though Gustav clearly looked younger, the aura of power circulating around him made the man feel he wasn't one to be messed with. Ahem, yes, we can do that, the man voiced out with a wry smile as he tried composing himself. Damien and Siri stared at each other with a surprised expression, not understanding what was happening. Gustav proceeded to drop the man, who turned to the person behind the counter. Refund Mr. Damien's payment immediately, he commanded. The lady behind nodded and began making the proper transactions. In a few moments, Damien was refunded, and the people in the vicinity were still shocked, staring at the scene as they couldn't understand how Gustav handled the situation. Gustav turned to the side and began leaving. Wait, big brother, Damien voiced out and ran across the hallway to catch up to Gustav before he could turn towards the corridor area. Don't call me that, Gustav stated. What can I call you? Damien asked. Gustav responded with his name. Oh, thanks, big brother Gustav, he said while bowing with a smile and respectful look. Just Gustav is fine, Gustav responded with a dismissive expression and turned to the side. Wait, big brother Gustav, Damien voiced out again. Gustav paused his steps and turned around. From the looks of things, you're new in this city, he voiced out as he brought out a card. Do give me a call if you need help with anything here. I would like to repay my debt to you. I was born in this place, so I know every nook and cranny, he said while passing the card to Gustav. Thanks once again, big brother Gustav, he voiced out and bowed quickly before turning around and running out of the premises before Gustav could respond. Gustav stared at the small black card with contact info on it. After a brief moment, he decided not to throw it away and kept it in his storage device. He turned around and walked into the corridor he was headed for earlier. Outside the building, Damien and Siri got into a luxurious-looking hover car that was already parked by the side waiting for them. That pig. I will make sure I have him punished. I'm sorry, Siri, he voiced out as he got into the car. It's fine, Damien. We can check in there on another date when we're both bigger, Siri said with a shy look. Damien reached out to pat her head and rubbed on her hair affectionately. Don't worry, big brother has another place we can head to where we can have a good view of the city, Damien voiced out with a smile. A look of excitement appeared on Siri's face as she heard that, but then her face had a bit of confusion written on it as she recalled something. Damien, who was that big brother that helped us? She asked. Oh, that was big brother Gustav. He's such a cool dude, Damien responded. Big brother Gustav? Her eyes widened with realization. No wonder he looked so familiar. Damien, that's Gustav Crimson, she added with a tone of amazement. Gustav Crimson? Impossible. Wait. Oh my goodness. He is the one. Damien's eyes widened as well as he realized this too. What is he doing in this city? Siri voiced out with a tone of curiosity. At this point, Gustav had already arrived in his room on the top floor. It was quite the luxurious penthouse. Gustav unloaded his things from his storage device and placed them in different parts. After he checked around the place, he moved towards the main living room and stood in front of the massive window pane where he could see the view of the city from. This building was one of the tallest buildings in the city, but it still didn't come close to being as tall as the MBO Tower in Plankton City, which had its tip poking into space. Gustav moved towards the balcony area, causing the glass-like door to shift open as it sensed his presence approaching. The wind greeted his face, blowing his hair backward due to the high height in the sky. He was practically in the clouds here, making the ground barely visible. However, Gustav could still see clearly even without making use of God eyes. Gustav looked up and proceeded to jump a little. He grabbed onto the ledge of the roofing area and pulled himself upwards. He landed on the small golden eagle statue protruding from the side and, from there, leaped towards the roof of the building. Gustav landed right atop the building where the wind first drifted across his place fiercely, causing his clothes to flap and his hair to blow backward. Gustav had left his hair unkempt for these past 10 months, so it was close to reaching his shoulder area. This was why it was harder for people to recognize him, even though he was a fast-rising sensation back then during the MBO test phases. Gustav moved forward and leaped to the top of the massive pole spike protruding from the middle of the rooftop. He landed on it and squatted while staring down at the city from this point. God Eyes has been activated. This height gave him the chance to check through several structures while making use of God Eyes. Gustav's eyesight instantly zoomed in on the building hundreds of feet ahead, and he scanned through the floors one after the other with the image of a certain person in his mind. This method seemed crude, but Gustav reckoned it was easier than visiting the police station in search of Boss Danzo. There'd be a lot of processes that would take time, and the cops may not be efficient in finding him properly. Chapter 663. It might take weeks, and he didn't want so much time gone before he found Boss Danzo, seeing as he might be in trouble. Gustav proceeded to scan from building to building one at a time. It was a long and arduous process, but his brain and eyesight were functioning so fast that he only needed to stare at a person for 0.1 seconds to scan their face and figure out if they were what he was looking for or not. It took over 2 hours for Gustav to scan this area of the districts, checking every person within the buildings, streets, and even public roads. At this time, it was already nightfall, but surprisingly, even though the skies were still bright, Gustav looked up, staring at the star-shaped flaming pearl up in the sky. It was still dazzling with immense flames, radiating like an artificial sun in the sky. The light from it prevented the city from entering nightfall like it was supposed to. Yes, the time displayed that it was night, but the skies were still as bright as ever due to the radiating light from it. The burning flames of the sands surrounding the city also acted as light to prevent any form of darkness as well, so Burning Sand City could be classified as a city that never sleeps since it was 24 hours daytime. Gustav's crimson and green-colored eyes zoomed in on the massive star-shaped pearl in the sky. He could already see the energy readings accumulating by the side of his line of sight, which depicted that the floating structure had an immense amount of energy. Gustav kept zooming his eyesight on it, wanting to see through it since he was intrigued. His eyes felt like it was in flames as his sight phased through the flames. SSHHHHSSSHHH, a sizzling sound began to ring out as Gustav's sight continued piercing through the dazzling flames, heading for the surface of the main structure. His eyes looked extremely strained as his forehead creased up and his face squeezed. He gritted his teeth in pain and continued trying to sear through it. Just when it looked like he was close to phasing through, Gustav suddenly closed his eyes. Pant, pant, pant. He breathed in and out profusely as blood dripped out the sides of his eyes, rolling down his cheeks. Gustav opened his eyes after deactivating God Eyes, which was completely strained and reddened. It was obvious he had sustained some injuries trying what he did earlier. Swipe. He cleaned the trails of blood left across his face from his eyes. Regeneration has been activated. It nearly fried my eyes, Gustav muttered as his eyes began healing up. He was curious about what exactly this floating mass of flaming pearl in the sky was, but he wasn't ready to completely ruin his eyes this night because of it. If his eyes took in more damage, it would take longer to heal. Within a structure where different monitors displayed different parts of the city, officers moved around the place. "Sir, I spotted a person on the rooftop of Faviola Relaxation Palace." One of the officers, clacking on a holographic keyboard, voiced out. "Give me a clear picture." The officer who seemed to be in charge voiced out from behind with his hands locked together behind him. A large display of a building on a holographic screen appeared up ahead, which was 3 times bigger than the rest. Gustav could be seen squatting atop the spiky pole that shot out from the middle of the rooftop. "What is he doing?" The officer in charge behind asked with a confused tone as he spotted Gustav's eyes glowing. The others in the room had confused looks as well since they didn't know what they were looking at here. "Reference his face and get me a database on this young man," the man behind commanded. In a matter of seconds, Gustav's face was scanned and searched up on the city's database as they tried to bring up information on him. Truin, Truin, Truin. Lots of words began piling up on the screen as the AI displayed flashes rearranging the words appearing. "Information locked," a loud robotic voice was heard next. Everyone stared at the screen with a look of confusion. The multiple other officers clacking on the holographic keyboards tried as much as possible to get through the firewalls blocking the piece of information on Gustav, but it was all futile. "Sir, we can't get through," one of them voiced out. He hasn't really committed an act of felony just yet. Watch out for the young man and report any suspicious activities of his in public. I'll deal with the issue of his information myself," the man stated and proceeded to walk out of the room. Meanwhile, at this point, Gustav was back in his room making plans for the next day on what part of the district he was going to check out next. There were practically 4 sections for him to check out, and he had scanned through one already. He was hoping he would be able to check everywhere within the vicinity in the next 2 days and find Boss Danzo. The longer time he spent, the more anxious Gustav got since he practically had no information on what was going on. First night in the city, even though it's not a night. "Let me stroll around for a bit," Gustav muttered as he changed out of his outfit and wore a black hoodie. Donning the hoodie on his head, he walked out of the penthouse. The next day arrived in a flash, and Gustav once again was up since early in the morning. Last night nothing interesting happened, but he did get to witness the splendor of the city better from down there. He saw some street acts, close-by bars, and even some virtual reality gaming activities added with bets. The city also seemed to have a licensed and registered brawl organization called the Peasants' Battle. Chapter 664. The city also seemed to have a licensed and registered brawl organization called the Peasants' Battle. Here people went to watch fights between ordinary people and bet against who would win. Anyone at a legal age could join since it wasn't against the law. Gustav found many interesting things about this particular district and understood why it was truly a business district. He just hoped he would be able to find Boss Danzo on time. First of all, he decided to check his daily tasks for the day. Daily tasks, 1/3, take down 5 hostiles. Daily tasks, 2/3, visit Grayscale Pharmaceuticals. Daily tasks, 3/3, sprint across the surface of the second tallest building in the city 3 times. "You sure have it in for me today." "What's with the hostiles?" Gustav asked the system in his head. "Not my fault." Auto-generated "Remember Kikiki?" the system voiced in Gustav's head with a light chuckle. "How am I supposed to take down 5 hostiles? What if no one shows me any hostility today?" Gustav asked with a frustrated tone as he felt the system was too inconsiderate with this daily task. "Not my problem. Make people get hostile to you and beat them up or something," the system responded with a fake yawn afterward. Gustav moved out of the penthouse to complete the daily tasks and decided to start with the 3rd one first. Since there wasn't any rule against using mild mixed blood abilities that didn't cause destruction, he felt there wouldn't be an issue completing that. Sprint has been activated. Gustav sped across the streets of the city towards the area where the second tallest building was located. It was quite distant from the Faviola Relaxation Palace, but Gustav couldn't make use of his ride prepared for him. He imagined calling Fumar to take him on a ride to where the second tallest building was located and, after arriving there, telling Fumar to wait while he got down from the car and proceeded to run up and down the building thrice. After that, He would go back into the car and tell Fumar to drive him back to the hotel. It all seemed silly to him. What would be his explanation for why he only drove here to run up and down a building 3 times? Although he wouldn't need to explain to anyone, he felt it would be better if he just ran there himself. He'll have to do something about my speed skills later, Gustav thought as he ran across the road, swerving from side to side to dodge the pedestrians. Gustav was a bit worried because Sprint and Dash happened to have maxed out their levels some time ago. The system didn't give him any hints on whether this was the limit for them both or not, so he didn't know what to do about them. The level of his speed would be close to being stagnant for a long time if this was the limit. His speed would only increase based on the level of his bloodline rank, which was currently slow and increasing right now. The only reason he wasn't too worried was the fact that he could still add attribute points to speed. So even if it was going to improve slowly, making use of Sprint and Dash at the level they currently were would still multiply his speed level, making him faster than normal. This can't be the limit, right? Gustav asked internally, but the system didn't respond. Gustav decided not to push it. He would find out eventually. Whoosh! Lots of people on the side of the road had their clothes flapping from the outburst of wind as a dark streak cut through their midst. There were gasps of astonishment since some of them could spot the figure and realized it was a person. The mixed bloods, in particular, was able to tell and felt whoever that was would be very powerful due to the fast speed. This was because many mixed bloods who were even more powerful than Gustav were unable to move this fast. However, in a fight, that didn't mean Gustav would win. Many powerful mixed bloods were able to react to speed quicker than theirs. Gustav arrived at the building after 20 minutes of running across the city. Starry Sky Properties. A firm and colorful sign could be seen at the top area of the 430-story building. Swoosh! Gustav didn't need to join Sprint and Dash together to run across the surface of the building. Small tapping sounds reverberated across the vicinity as he ascended across the surface of the building amidst the stunned gazes of everyone. It only took about 30 seconds to run across the smooth-surfaced window panes and run back down. Whoosh! Gustav came back around and ran across it again. The people working within the building were at a loss as to what was happening. It was only close to 2 more minutes to complete his 3 times scaling across the building, and at this point, someone was about to call the cops, but then they realized it wasn't happening again. Gustav was already gone. Daily task completed, 1/3. Sprint across the surface of the second tallest building in the city 3 times. Gustav stared at the notification in his line of sight as he paused his running at a particular street close to the hotel area. Now to complete the second, only the crazy one will be left after this, Gustav muttered with a sigh as he tapped on a device that displayed the map of the city. He checked for where Grayscale Pharmaceuticals was located. He walked along the side of the road headed back towards the hotel, which was just 2 turns away on the other street. I can't tell Fumar to drive me there, Gustav thought out loud as he disengaged the map. He suddenly felt eyes on him and turned around. Gustav mumbled after looking around and only see regular pedestrians moving around just like him. Chapter 665. This district was always crowded with people, so it would be impossible to spot one person staring at him. Multiple people could subconsciously stare at him, but this particular one he sensed felt intentional, which was why he turned around. Gustav proceeded to continue on his way. He didn't really have time to play detective right now since he had to complete his daily tasks and continue looking for Boss Danzo. Arriving back at the hotel, Gustav moved towards the garage where Fumar was already waiting for him. "Good morning, boss." Fumar greeted him as he moved into the car. "Just Gustav is fine," Gustav responded after sitting within the car. "All right, boss. Where do you want to go?" Fumar asked with a wide smile while looking back. "It's like my words are going through one ear and coming out the other," Gustav said internally while rolling his eyes. "Grayscale Pharmaceuticals," Gustav responded. "All right, boss, sit tight," Fumar voiced out as he turned on the engine. FRRHHHHHHHHRR. They zoomed out of the park in a few moments and began heading there. Behind a pillar by the far end of the garage, a fat-body structured man shifted out the side, staring in the direction the car zoomed off in. His eyes squinted as he kept looking with a dissatisfied expression. "Boss, I heard you're the same person from a year ago who came first in the MBO entrance tests," Fumar voiced out as he sped through the city. Where did you hear that? Gustav asked. Small talks from my superiors. Fumar had a look of astonishment as he responded. So it truly is you? Fumar could barely focus on the road, even with his eyes widened in astonishment. He wanted to look back and stare at Gustav once again, but he knew that would be inappropriate, so he maintained his sights on the road. Focus on the road. Who I am isn't important, Gustav stated. Yes, boss, Fumar responded with a respectful tone. But boss, you really went through a lot of changes. Fumar suddenly started talking again. Gustav sighed at the back seat, as he had to listen to Fumar tut away during their journey. After some time, they arrived in front of a large skyscraper shaped to look like an upside-down pipette. The sign, Grayscale Pharmaceuticals, could be seen above, which meant they had arrived at their destination. This was a place located on the west side of the city, quite close to the city walls, which barricaded them from the burning sands outside. Gustav got off the car, ready to move in. Boss, they'll wait here for you to finish your business, Fumar voiced out while getting out of the car as well. There will be no need for you to do that. You can go, for now, Fumar. I will spend a lot of time looking around the place. They'll call if I need you, Gustav stated before resuming moving towards the building. Fumar wanted to refute, but Gustav was already at the entrance of the building before the words could leave his mouth. Oh, all right then, Fumar mumbled and moved into the hovercar before starting the engine and zooming off. The instant Gustav went through the entrance, he got the system's notification. Daily task completed, February 3rd, visit Grayscale Pharmaceuticals. This one was pretty easy. What was the point of giving such a daily task? Gustav muttered with a low tone as he moved around on the ground floor of the building. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Gustav could hear the voices of people gathered together in a large group, so he turned to the side to look. He spotted a holographic stand on the east side of the ground floor which stated some information. Arkham Potency, First Stage Serum. Gustav read out some words. Right in front of the stand, multiple people were lined up in a queue, and the staff dressed in official medical outfits were attending to them. Gustav could hear some words like, Dash, it's just in its first stage of testing, right? Dash, did you read the terms and conditions of the agreement? Dash, we will not be held responsible for any. So it's a serum test, and these are voluntary test subjects. Gustav already understood what was going on a few moments after reading the situation. Can I help you, sir? A lady in a medical outfit called out to Gustav from the side. No, Gustav responded bluntly and turned around to leave. Just as he walked a few steps forward, a loud voice was heard from behind. To what do we owe the honor of the MBO's most talented youngster visiting our organization today? A strong masculine tone was heard from the other end, matched with powerful footsteps. The other workers in the vicinity spotted the person who was approaching from the other end, and all started greeting him with respectful looks. Gustav paused his steps as he heard that and turned around slightly. Might you be interested in being our Arkham Serum first subject? The man voiced out again as he approached Gustav from the other end. This man had long black hair that reached his lower back area, and he looked no older than 30 years of age with vibrant-looking slanted eyes. The most surprising aspect was his height. He was 12 feet in height, which was twice Gustav's height currently. His hair, which was reaching his lower back area, was the same height as Gustav, 6 feet in length. Gustav's face showed no expression as he turned around. I stumbled into this place by mistake. I was already leaving, he voiced out and resumed walking forward. As he arrived at the entrance, a big hand reached out to grab his shoulder from behind. Come on, even if you stumbled upon this place by mistake, I'm sure fate brought you here. Forget about the serum. How about I give you a little tour of the place? The massive man proposed. Gustav turned his head to the side, staring at the palm, grabbing onto his left shoulder, and pulled his shoulder forward, releasing himself from the grasp of this massive man. Chapter 666. I'm busy, maybe next time, Gustav voiced out before walking out the entry point. Oh, bummer. The massive man voiced out with a slightly disappointed look. Dash, did he just refuse Sir Zill's offer? Dash, oh damn. That kid must be really something to refuse a tour offer from him. The officials were surprised as they saw Gustav moving further and further away from the premises. I guess I'll have to repay my debt to you some other time. The massive man who was known as Sir Zil smiled as he voiced out and turned around. It would seem the ceiling wasn't high for no good reason. If this structure was built in a normal way like others, Sir Zil's head might be brushing the ceiling from the moment he walked in. It was obvious that he was a mixed blood because only mixed bloods would grow this tall without having any defects. Normal humans would have internal defects if they grew to this height. Although treatable, they would never be as bulky as this man who had the width of a tree. Gustav, who was already quite a distance from the premises, already squinted his eyes as he turned around. He couldn't understand why, but the massive man gave him a kind of uneasy feeling. Is there any reason why you sent me there? Gustav asked inwardly. The system still didn't respond to him, which he found quite suspicious. I don't have time for this right now. I have to find Boss Danzo, Gustav voiced internally before moving around the vicinity. Hours later in the afternoon, Gustav was headed back towards the hotel. He had finished scanning through another section of the city, the area where Grayscale Pharmaceuticals was located. Gustav was heading back once again with disappointment after not finding Boss Danzo in this area as well. After this, he had 2 more sections to cover, but he wanted to head back to the hotel in the meantime. He had spent a lot of energy points making use of God Eyes, so recuperation was necessary. Gustav kept thinking about how he'd easily find Boss Danzo if he had unlocked life signs tracking before Boss Danzo left. He had stored the life sign pattern of everyone he cared about, excluding Boss Danzo because Boss Danzo was already gone before he obtained the power. He couldn't help but sigh as he walked through the same alleyway that led to the street where he sensed being watched. Gustav closed in on the end of the alleyway, which led to a broad road with good visuality, but then he suddenly paused his footsteps. About time you showed yourselves, Gustav smirked as he voiced out. Furry, 7 dark figures suddenly phased out of the walls of the buildings by the sides. Gustav turned around at this point, and the visible look of joy on his face could be seen as these dark figures walked towards him. I was starting to worry about how I was going to complete the 3rd task. This is perfect, Gustav said internally. These dark figures wore a hoodie and holographic masks, subtly revealing a smoky face to hide their real looks. They turned to the sides to stare at each other, which depicted they were surprised to see Gustav being in high spirits even when he was being ambushed by 7 people. Come on. I don't have all day, Gustav said while turning his neck violently sideways, which made popping sounds. He clenched both fists tightly, and they made the popping sounds as well. It's been 3 weeks. I need the practice. Gustav's expression suddenly turned cold once again as he voiced out. At this point, all 7 figures phased forward like phantoms conjuring different abilities as they attacked Gustav. Gustav slid backward first, dodging the fist of flames thrown at his head, and kept slanting further backward to dodge the rest of the attacks. Pa! His palm slapped the ground as he suddenly spun around with his right leg stretched out. Bang! His leg crashed into the face of the first one, sending the dark figure flying, and kept swinging towards the next one beside him. Fwoof! The second one scattered into a black burst of smoke for a moment, causing Gustav's leg to phase through him. Interesting. Maybe since I didn't get the last one, I might be able to get this one, Gustav thought as he leaped upwards the moment he regained his balance. A massive 6-foot ice-shaped scythe swept underneath his feet as his body ascended. Several attacks were thrown into the air while his body was still in midair. Gustav repeatedly spun across the air as his arms turned brownish-red, becoming more muscular and larger. Size manipulation has been activated. The instant after he activated partial bull transformation, he proceeded to use size manipulation next. The group down saw the massive shadow looming over them and tried to move away as fast as possible. Bang! A humongous brownish-colored fist slammed down in the middle of the alleyway, flattening 3 of the black figures in one go and causing winds to blast across the vicinity. KRRYCVHHHH. Bang! Bang! Several window panes were broken due to the impact as a small crater formed in the middle. The other dark figures who managed to get away before it touched down stared at each other for an instant before suddenly dashing out in all directions. One could tell that underneath the guise of the holographic mask, they had panicked expressions. They didn't know that they were coming after a monster. The three who got flattened had already passed out in the crater with blood-soaked bodies. As the four left dashed in different directions to prevent Gustav from catching them all, Gustav proceeded to merge sprint and dash in that instant. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash. The four running in every direction suddenly slowed down in his line of sight. Gustav proceeded to reach down and pick up broken parts of the ground shaped in spiky ways. Chapter 667. Arching his arm backward while holding onto one, his muscles bulged immensely as he gathered a lot of power into his arm before flinging it out. While the first projectile was traveling towards the one moving southwards, Gustav had already turned to the east to fling out the next one with force as well. He repeated the same actions in the rest of the directions and proceeded to deactivate combination since he didn't have a lot of energy points at the moment. Poochie, poochie, poochie. Loud piercing sounds rang out along with screams as three of the four dark figures got stabbed through by the flying projectiles. The force at which Gustav threw it caused their bodies to be lifted across the air as it stabbed into them and slammed them against a wall, pinning them to it like they were being crucified. The last one turned into a puff of black smoke for an instant, causing the projectile to phase through him, so he was safe. He arrived in front of a hovercar up ahead and was about to go in when Gustav's figure blasted through 200 feet in nearly an instant, arriving behind him. Grab. Gustav grabbed hold of his neck before he could get in and slammed him against the ground 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. The dark figure instantly passed out after the third slam amidst the stares of the pedestrians walking along this street. Gustav ignored the panicked glares of everyone and dragged the dark figure back to the alleyway where the rest of his comrades were laid out as well. Daily task completed. March 3rd, take down 5 hostiles. The notification for completion of the third daily task appeared in Gustav's line of sight, which he ignored in the meantime. Plop. Gustav dropped him right beside the others in the crater and turned to the side to move towards the first dark figure who was bleeding out while sticking to the wall. Gustav punched his face, destroying the holographic mask. The smoky face created by the holographic mask instantly dissipated, and a woman's face could be seen. She was bleeding from her nose, and a look of fear was displayed on her face as she stared down at Gustav while coughing out blood. I would ask who sent you, but I think I already know, Gustav voiced out and turned around to start walking along the alleyway like he was returning back to where he came from. The other dark figures stabbed to the wall were also conscious, turned their faces to the sides to see where Gustav was headed. Close to the end of the alleyway, he suddenly paused his footsteps and squinted his eyes before turning towards the left. Gustav dashed forward with his arm arched backward and threw a punch at the wall. Bang! As his fist tore through the wall, a loud shriek was heard along with the crumbling of that side of the building. Grab! As Gustav pulled his arm out of the hole on the wall, a short, fat man could be seen in his grasp, lifted above the ground. His face was bleeding as he kicked desperately, trying to free himself from Gustav's grasp. Please, spare me. Spare me. He cried out while holding onto Gustav's hand. This man was the same man he had met the day before in the hotel, trying to prevent the teenagers from getting a room. Why did I not expect this? Gustav chuckled as he voiced out. He had forgotten that people always try to take revenge when he put them in their place. Just as Gustav was about to speak, the blaring sounds of sirens rang out as the cops arrived on the scene. He turned to the side as he spotted them getting off their vehicles. Freeze. Hold it right there. They surrounded the vicinity in a matter of seconds while inspecting the scene. Get a paramedic over here. One of them voiced out while standing in front of one of them who was stabbed to the wall. Sir, drop the hostage. One of them voiced out while approaching Gustav with a massive cannon-like weapon. Others also followed beside him and pointed out weapons at Gustav. Hostage? What are y'all on? Gustav asked with a cold look as he turned around to stare at them. Minutes later, the whole situation was sorted out after the fat man confessed to sending the mixed bloods goons after Gustav. The cops apologized to Gustav for suspecting him to be the culprit that initiated the whole situation, to which he just scoffed at and proceeded to walk out of the alleyway. I ain't the one with masks. Why are the authorities so dumb? Gustav said out loud as he passed by the side of a cop. None of them could hold it against him for saying that since they nearly arrested him. The culprits were apprehended and all taken away for treatment first. Gustav arrived at the end of the alleyway and tapped a small device that displayed a holographic image of Boss Danzo. He was thinking of going back to ask the cops to search for him, but he just crossed it out and turned to the side to keep moving. SHRRRHHHHHZZZ, a hovercar suddenly stopped by his side, causing him to stop his movement and put away the device. Gustav mumbled as he turned to the side while the door of the hovercar opened up. Big Brother Gustav. A loud shout was heard from within as Gustav spotted the same teenage boy he saved yesterday dressed in school uniform. Hey! Gustav greeted half-fastly while turning to the front to leave. Come join me for a ride, Damien suggested. I'm busy right now, maybe next time, Gustav responded while moving forward. I saw the picture just now. Are you related to that person? Damien suddenly asked before Gustav could get too far. Gustav paused his footsteps and turned around while squinting his eyes. He is someone I'm looking for. Why? Gustav voiced out with a suspicious tone. Oh, you're looking for Mr. Eldorado. I know where you can find him. Chapter 668. Oh, you're looking for Mr. Eldorado. I know where you can find him, Damien voiced out with a tone of excitement. Mr. Eldorado? Who's that? Gustav asked as he walked back towards the hovercar. The man picture you were checking out, Damien responded. You must be mistaken. He isn't. Before Gustav could complete his statement, Damien was already tapping on some buttons within the car. Truruin, a holographic image of Boss Danzo, looking older with a beard, appeared within the car. Mr. Eldorado, Damien said while gesturing at the image. How? What? Gustav was confused as he stared at the image of Boss Danzo. Of course, his eyes weren't failing him. That was truly Boss Danzo, which begged the question of why this kid knew him by another name. Let's go for a ride. They'll show you where to find him, Damien voiced out. There was no way Gustav would say no to this. He immediately moved into the car and sat beside Damien. Zrii, how do you know him? Damien asked as the car zoomed off into the distance. That's not necessary. Just tell me where he is. Gustav seemed antsy as he voiced out. Okay, but I doubt anyone into the underground fights hasn't heard of Mr. Eldorado, the 10-hit combo finisher, Damien stated with a light chuckle. The what now? Gustav voiced out with a confused expression. The 10-hit combo finisher, Mr. Eldorado, Damien stated again. Gustav was really starting to wonder if it was the same Boss Danzo who parted ways with him over a year ago. Tell me everything from the beginning, Gustav voiced out. Everything? Well, for one part, it's kinda illegal, which is probably why you haven't found him. Damien began explaining everything to Gustav from the start. Gustav couldn't believe his ears as Damien told him the tale of how Boss Danzo became known as the 10-hit combo finisher. If anyone ever told him that Boss Danzo could engage in a fight or illegal-related activity, he would never believe it unless he saw it with his own eyes. The words coming from this teenager were very hard to believe. He just couldn't picture the character he had known Boss Danzo for as this Mr. Eldorado character. He couldn't connect them in any way except for the fact that they looked exactly the same. Another thing that bugged Gustav's mind was how the kid has so much information about illegal underground fights to this extent. He killed 27 people already? Gustav voiced out with a stunned tone as Damien narrated to a point. Yes, it was exciting to watch, Damien responded with a look of delight. But then he noticed the expression on Gustav's face. You seem surprised, Damien voiced out. The person I knew would never harm a soul. Maybe he's not that person anymore, Gustav muttered with a tone of suspiciousness. Gustav continued listening to Damien's narration till they arrived in front of a particular building. So far, what he knew about Boss Danzo was the fact that a few months back, he suddenly appeared in the underground fighting club as a new fighter under one of the bosses who they call ringlords. Apparently, since he appeared, he had been a big sensation amongst the fighters and the audience as well. Boss Danzo looked like a weak, middle-aged man, which was why he took the crowd by surprise when he managed to defeat some of the most powerful fighters in the underground fighting club. He was known for his finishing move, which consisted of an unbreakable 10-hit combo. The moment he unleashed this move, it was guaranteed that on the 10th hit, the opponent would lose their life because the final hit was a lethal strike. He rose through the fighters' rankings due to his feats, becoming one of the crowd's favorites who big moguls bet on during his night fights. Boss Danzo had gone by the name Mr. Eldorado this whole time. According to Damien's information, so far, the underground fights had seasons and periods where they occurred, and only people with deep-rooted backgrounds and status were able to attend. Even though it was illegal, they had viewers online as well that tuned in from their houses to watch. Normal people had no idea where the fight matches took place, and those who did never revealed it. Gustav couldn't wrap his head around why Boss Danzo would be doing this, but he was sure that something was definitely up somewhere. Now he just had to focus on finding him. "Why are we here?" Gustav asked as they got off the car. The building right in front of them was the Grayscale Pharmaceuticals, where Gustav visited this morning. "We have to meet my grandfather first. He will have information on the next fight as well as the location," Damien voiced out as he moved forward. It turned out that the location for fights changes at times, so they couldn't just visit anyone since there was a probability that the next fight wouldn't hold there. Also, unless there was a fight held at a certain location, it would be impossible to see Boss Danzo. "Your grandfather works here?" Gustav asked as they moved in. "Well, you can say that, but he's more like the owner," Damien chuckled while voicing out. "The owner?" Gustav was quite surprised as they headed towards one of the corridors. They arrived at the elevator area and got teleported to the last floor in a few moments. They arrived in front of a long corridor that led towards one large door at the end. Two men in medical outfits could be seen coming from up ahead. One was a gigantic 30-year-old-looking man with flowing black hair, while the other was a middle-aged-looking man approximately 6 feet in height with short blue hair and glasses. The gigantic man, about 12 feet tall, was the same man Gustav met when he arrived here in the morning, Serzel. They seemed to be engaging in a conversation as they walked down the corridor, and it was at that moment that Gustav arrived with Damien. "Grandfather," Damien voiced out with a look of delight. "Hey kid, you're back, and you are with company," Serzel voiced out as Damien continued walking forward. "He's your grandfather?" Gustav voiced out with a tone of confusion as he stared at Serzel. Chapter 669. "He's your grandfather?" Gustav voiced out with a tone of confusion as he stared at Serzel. "Yes, this is my grandfather, the great scientist Sil," Damien voiced out with a proud tone. "Oh," Gustav was a bit surprised as he also walked forward. He couldn't believe that this man who looked no older than 30 years of age was actually a grandfather. Thinking more about it, Damien mentioned his grandfather owned the place, and Gustav happened to meet Serzel in the morning. The manner in which Serzel spoke made him believe he had a high authority in this organization, but he never would have thought Serzel was the actual owner due to looking this young, and now it all made sense. "Gustav Crimson, we meet again," Serzel stated while stretching out his hand for a handshake. Gustav mumbled and shook the hand in return. "Looks like you honored your word of us meeting another time," Serzel said with a smile as they separated hands. "Not really. I'm here for another reason," Gustav responded. "Well, what matters is, you're here," Serzel responded with another smile. The truth was, he probably wouldn't have come back here if Damien wasn't related to Serzel. "You both have met?" Damien was surprised as he heard the dialogue. Mr. Crimson visited in the morning. According to his words, he stumbled into the facility, Serzel stated. "Yeah, we only met by coincidence," Gustav said with a low tone. "Coincidence? This whole situation just feels a bit weird," Gustav said internally, hoping the system would chip something in, but there was no response. "Interesting, maybe Big Brother Gustav was looking for me," Damien said with a light chuckle. "I really appreciate you saving my grandkids the other day," Serzel said with an appreciative tone before Gustav could reply to Damien's statement. "It's not a big deal." "Wait, grandkids?" Gustav raised one eyebrow up as he voiced out. "Yeah, Damien and Siri said you helped them at the hotel reception the other day," Serzel said. "That wasn't your girlfriend?" Gustav turned to the side to ask Damien. "No, Siri is my little sister," Damien clarified with a hint of confusion on his face. It would seem Gustav and many other people who witnessed the scenario had made the mistake of thinking the siblings were dating, not knowing they were actually related by blood. Oh, an awkward silence ensued as Gustav exclaimed, "We'll get going now, sir." The man by the side who looked like he could father Sir Zill voiced out. "All right, Parker, we'll continue our discussion later." Sir Zill nodded at the man who proceeded to walk towards the exit of the corridor. "All right, let's get down to the business of why you're here in my office," Sir Zill said with a hospitable tone and gestured for Gustav to follow him. Minutes later, within a luxurious and comfortable-looking office that had a wide view of the city, Gustav could be seen sitting on one of the sofas. Sir Zill sat on the opposite end with Damien right beside him. "I see. So you're here to find Mr. Eldorado," Sir Zill said with a contemplative look. Damien and Gustav seemed to have explained the situation to him. "Originally, we top holders who are given the location for every event are supposed to keep it to ourselves, but I owe you for helping my grandkids, so I don't mind revealing information to you," Sir Zill voiced out lengthily. "But can you tell me your relationship with Mr. Eldorado? You also know him by a different name, Boss Danzohum." Sir Zill had a tone of curiosity as he added. "He's family to me," Gustav responded bluntly. "He's like the father I never had," Gustav said internally as he stared at Sir Zill. "So, how can I find him?" Gustav asked again. "The information is yours, but can you promise we'll meet again?" Sir Zill requested with a polite tone. "That's not a problem," Gustav replied immediately. "All right then," Sir Zill smiled in response. By night, which was still daytime in Burning Sand City, Gustav sat within the penthouse with a red, thick-looking card in his grasp. The card had a blood-colored emblem in the middle. 3 days from now? Eh? Gustav muttered as he kept the card within his storage device. Apparently, Sir Zill had given him information on when Boss Danzo's next match would be and also access to the location. Gustav felt he would probably still be able to find Boss Danzo on his own earlier if he checked around the city. However, after the disclosure of information from Sir Zill, he realized how wrong he was. It turned out that the battles didn't happen in Burning Sand City exactly, but very close to it. How such a thing was possible was beyond him since the outskirts of the city was covered in miles of burning sands. He realized that Boss Danzo must have called him when he had the chance to be in the city or something, since there was a high probability that he wasn't here at the moment. This brought him to the question of what exactly was going on and why Boss Danzo was a part of an illegal underground operation. From what he knew so far, only normal people with no abilities were allowed to participate because, according to the crowd, it made things more interesting since they were weaker than mixed bloods. However, they could still use technological-based weapons. It was obvious that something must have happened for Boss Danzo to be in such a situation. From cook to a killer. "This doesn't make any sense," Gustav mumbled with a sigh. He had decided to get to the bottom of this, and the only way was by asking Boss Danzo directly, since no one knew how he arrived there or became a part of the fighters. Thinking to this point, Gustav began making plans for the next 3 days. Within a small dark room, a short, stout man stood in the middle of a round table where several powerful figures were seated. "Eldorado, are you prepared?" Chapter 670. Within a small dark room, a short, stout man stood in the middle of a round table where several powerful figures were seated. He had a small black hat on his head along with a black apron, making him look like he was a torturer of some kind. "Eldorado, are you prepared?" one of the 3 figures seated around the table asked. "I am," he responded with a tone of certainty. "Mrs. Triss wants her brutally murdered in the worst way possible." "Do not disappoint our expectations," another one voiced out. "I will not disappoint you all," the short man referred to as Eldorado responded with a slight bow. "Good. After this, you only have 6 more fights to regain your freedom," the third one, which happened to be a feminine voice, spoke as well. After the conclusion of this brief meeting, they released him, and he turned around to leave. Eldorado, who was obviously Boss Danzo looking fiercer and scarier, walked back to his shelter within this stronghold whilst in deep thought. Christmas is a 16-year-old maid female from the House of Rel and an influential family in Burning Sand City. She was caught red-handed by the madam of the household, having an affair with her son. They secretly sent her to the underground ring to be executed by one of the fighters in a match. Of course, they planned this in a way that the young girl agreed to their suggestion, claiming she would fight and defeat one of the fighters here if they could agree to leave her and the other kid alone to be with each other. The mother wanted nothing more and promised to let the maid girl date her son if she could win here, which was obviously impossible. But the girl, who was blinded by emotions and wanted nothing more than to prove that love was more powerful than any other thing in the world, she would find out in the most gruesome way that love was truly nothing in the face of power. Fortunately for her, she was placed against Boss Danzo, who was currently looking for a way to save the girl after finding out the real story behind everything. However, even with this boss, Danzo still hadn't figured out a way to save this 16-year-old who was drunk on fantasy. Children make decisions out of foolishness, and sometimes it can lead to destruction. Boss Danzo sighed internally as he walked down the dark corridor. My boy, I really hope you got the message. I wish I didn't have to drag you into this mess, but I could use a miracle right now, Boss Danzo said internally as he walked through a door on the left. A small room with a stand of weapons arranged by the side could be seen, along with a bed placed against the far end of the wall. Boss Danzo proceeded to move towards the bed area and sat on it with a worried expression. It's kill or be killed in the ring. I'm close to gaining back my freedom, but I can't let this kid die. He proceeded to remain in that position for a long time, thinking of a way to handle the situation. 3 days later, 3 days had gone by in the blink of an eye, and Gustav had spent the rest of the time completing his daily tasks, training, and sourcing for information on Boss Danzo. Truly, he was known as Mr. Eldorado by the people of the city, who secretly tuned in to watch the illegal underground fights. However, this was as much as the watchers knew. Anything else relating to the personal life of the fighters was unknown. Gustav was glad he didn't take Boss Danzo's picture to the cops, or it would have been a problem with him having to explain why he was looking for a criminal. All the fighters were termed criminals and definitely wouldn't be seen lurking around the city unless they had ways to disguise themselves. Boss Danzo probably had a way to disguise himself, and some of the corrupt powers within the city were involved in the illegal fights, so the fighters also had backing, which was why they couldn't be caught regardless. However, they still exercised caution and refrained from being in public view. Gustav still checked around the city during these 3 days, and confirmed that Boss Danzo truly wasn't within the city. Wherever they were hiding out was close to the city, but wasn't within. This made Gustav intrigued about how they did it, since only burning sands existed around the city. One couldn't find any structure for miles, neither could any structure exist on them. All of his questions will be answered today by nightfall. He had communicated with Sir Zil today, and he would be meeting up with him and Damien in front of the pharmaceuticals so they could leave together when the time came. During the last 3 days, Damien helped him gather information on the ring Lord Boss Danzo was under. Apparently, he was quite influential in the city for being one of the best businessmen, and nothing could link him to the illegal underground battles, even though he was one of the 3 creators. Gustav learned about the whereabouts of his businesses and the supposed 17 abodes within the city. The ring lord, who was known as Vanisher, was said to move around a lot, so pinpointing his precise location at a particular point in time was very challenging, especially when he had 17 different houses scattered across the city. He was said to be very rich and powerful, and also had deep roots within every law enforcement agency within the city. This was one of the reasons why he was able to get away with committing unlawful acts. Gustav had asked Damien during these times why his grandfather allowed him to watch the fights privately. His response was, "Grandfather said, I need to get used to seeing deaths since I have to join the MBO one day." Chapter 671. He said exposure to the killings will tamper my thoughts and prepare me for what is to come, making my mental state stronger and all that. Also, he's pushing me to understand that the world beyond this isn't all rainbows and sunshine. Gustav understood this method of thinking, but he still felt it was a bit rash for Sir Zil to make such a decision for his 15-year-old grandchild. Damien wanted to join the MBO and had even asked Gustav for some battle tips, but Gustav told him he would only offer some battle tips after he had found Boss Danzo and saved him from whatever ordeal was making him do this. All his mind during the last 3 days was focused on research and making plans. Damien's grandfather, Sir Zil, was known as the best scientist within the city and was amongst the group of researchers that found a new use for the burning sands, so he also could be considered among the top influential people in the city. However, His power and riches still didn't come close to that of Mr. Vanisher. Gustav knew the underground battles were illegal, but he had no real intention of stopping it since that wasn't what he was here for. Besides, according to what he had gathered, no one was forced to battle against their will, and many normal people tried to get in since it paid a bunch to fight there. Besides all this, Mr. Vanisher was quite the powerhouse, so going against him would be quite difficult. Gustav wasn't scared of him, but he also hoped Mr. Vanisher wasn't an enemy. He was literally here on vacation and could get kicked out of the city at any time if he caused trouble. Stirring the hornet's nest would not be wise unless he was ready to throw law and order out the window. Gustav spent the rest of the day finishing his daily tasks and research on Mr. Vanisher, as well as the rest of the other two ring lords. He also had information on all the 300 fighters at the back of his mind, a number that would clearly be shaved down after they went against each other, and half of them get exterminated. The deaths were the reason why the illegal underground battle dungeon kept recruiting new fighters almost daily. Close to 8 p.m., Gustav arrived in front of Grayscale Pharmaceuticals, where a luxurious-looking Jeep-like hovercar was waiting by the side. He went straight for it, and the doors opened for him to step in. Big brother Gustav, Damien was the first to greet from the side. "Welcome. Are you ready to go?" Serzel voiced out from the seat in front. "Sure," Gustav responded with a nod. The pilot started the engine and zoomed off into the distance. Zwihihayi, they drove along the road towards one of the fiery checkpoints in the middle of the district. As the hovercar approached the checkpoint, Gustav could see the circular, attracting fiery ball of light. They drove straight towards it like some other vehicles in the area, and immediately contact was made. The car was covered with a bright red light for an instant. Swaying, in the next instant, they arrived at the western edge of the city. Taking an alternate route that led further towards the edge, the road seemed deserted, like they were driving towards the dead end. And truly, they were. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav activated God Eyes and saw far towards the end of the road, which led to a small wasteland before the wall barricading the city. Gustav didn't say a word because, according to everything he had learned so far, the battle wasn't holding in the city. He was only intrigued about how they would get to the location from here. The driver kept moving till they were off the road and floating above the small wasteland. He got to a point and stopped the car. "Damien," Serzel called out to Damien from ahead. Damien nodded and got off the car. A red card appeared in his hand as he walked forward and arrived in front of the car. Beep, beep. The red card made a beeping sound and glowed as Damien moved further ahead. Zririan, a small reddish portal, opened up a few feet away from them, which was big enough for the car to fit in. Damien turned around to return back to the car after this happened. Zwihihayi, the driver, drove straight in, and the portal disappeared after they phased through, along with any traces of it ever appearing there. Arriving under what seemed like a tunnel way, the driver kept driving along the route that seemed a bit left curved. Gustav was a bit intrigued as to where they were at the moment, so he asked, "Where exactly is this?" "We're currently traveling underneath the burning sands," Serzel answered. "How is underground not hot enough to shatter the walls and melt the car?" Gustav felt this didn't make sense. Knowing how hot the burning sands were, according to research, it should even be hotter underground. That's because the flames don't burn that deep. The golden sands are reacting to the oxygen in the air, which keeps them burning forever. But oxygen cannot reach deep into the earth. At a certain point, it's obstructed, Serzel explained. "I see." Gustav now understood based on Serzel's explanation. He never knew the burning sands were reacting to oxygen. He thought it was just an unexplainable phenomenon. Serzel was a scientist, after all, so had no more about this than others. Anyways, Gustav felt things made sense now as he activated God Eyes. Looking up, his sight went through the car's roofing and through the roofing of the tunnelway as well. Sand components could already be seen as it kept traveling for more than 1,500 feet before arriving at the surface where he could see the flames like they were right in front of him. Gustav felt his eyesight affected and retracted it. "We're here." The instant he deactivated God Eyes, Damien voiced out. Chapter 672. "We're here." The instant he deactivated God Eyes, Damien voiced out. Gustav looked forward and could see a few cars lined up ahead and a massive opening which looked like the mouth of a monster. Another hovercar was coming from behind them, and some hovercars seemed to be coming from the other routes that led to this particular location. The hovercar was parked somewhere by the side as Gustav, Sergil, and Damien got off. Other people were also getting off their vehicles and moving towards the massive monster-structured opening, which had several guards standing in front. Everyone getting off cars had luxurious clothing, mostly expensive-looking suits and shoes, while for the women, dresses that sparkled. Gustav and Damien were the only ones dressed in casual outfits. Even Sergil was dressed in a white suit with small diamond-like stones embedded in different parts. Sergil had to worry about appearance since he was a prestigious figure in the city. Those who were on good terms with each other exchanged pleasantries as they moved into the venue. Sergil was a bit delayed as he came into contact with several figures and had to exchange a few words with them. Meanwhile, Gustav and Damien walked through the entrance. The guards eyed Gustav a little since they couldn't recognize him from the previous fights, but seeing him walking side by side with Damien, they decided to keep their mouths shut. Damien, Damien, a feminine voice called out to him from behind while they were walking into the underground facility. Ugh, Damien showed a disgusted expression as he heard the familiar voice. Big brother Gustav, let's walk faster, Damien whispered to Gustav. Gustav got the memo and truly walked faster along with Damien like they didn't hear the voice. However, this person seemed unrelenting as Gustav heard the sound of footsteps turned into running. Oh, he said internally. Pa. Damien. The person to whom this voice belonged tapped onto Damien's shoulder from behind and voiced out. Damien had no choice but to stop walking at this point as his face repeatedly twitched with disgust. Heh, Miranda. Damien forced a smile as he turned around to stare at the girl. It was a teenage girl who looked to be around the same age as Damien, with 2 pigtails by the sides of her head and very fair skin. She looked quite pretty, and for someone of a young age, her body developed crazy fast as well because she was having busts bigger than that of adults. Damien, I thought you said you wouldn't be attending? She questioned the moment he turned around. Yeah, I initially wasn't but changed my mind, Damien said while scratching his head. Oh, did you change it because of me? Her eyes widened with excitement, and her face turned red as she questioned. I need to ditch her. Oh yeah, I could use Big Brother Gustav's presence to my advantage, Damien thought. No, actually, I'm here because of Big Brother Gustav. I have to make sure he's... While Damien was speaking, he turned to the side to gesture at Gustav, but the instant he did, he froze up. Gustav was nowhere to be found. Big Brother, who now? Miranda asked with a confused expression while also looking around. Where did he go? Damien felt like punching air right now. No need to be shy, Damien. Let's go in together, she said while grabbing hold of Damien's hand and pulling him along with her. Wait, no, he was here. I swear. I need to find him, Damien kept voicing out while being pulled powerlessly by Miranda. He felt like bashing his head against the wall right now, but he had no choice but to follow her, hoping to ditch her later after he sighted Gustav. Currently, Gustav had arrived in the large facility, which had rooms where everyone present could watch from. Some rooms could contain up to 10 people, while some contained lesser. There was a glass panel up in front where they could see the stage from, which was a bit low since the rooms were exalted. The rooms were structured around the massive fighting stage in the middle, so everyone could watch from different angles without any obstructions. The room acted as a form of protection to prevent any fighter from attacking the spectators or any unexpected incident. The glass in front, which gave the spectators their view of the fighting stage, was also very sturdy and laced with protective energy to prevent any breakage. Since the stage was a few feet lower, it meant the spectators would have to look down from their exalted platform. Gustav was still moving around the circular corridor, looking for the best room. He spotted one that could only contain about 4 people and moved towards it to go in. Flashing the red card he was given by Sergil, the door slid open for him, and he went in. The sign, which displayed March 4th, changed to 4/4 the instant he went in as the door behind him closed up. 3 other men in good-looking outfits were seated on 3 out of the 4 seats positioned in front of the massive see-through glass up ahead. They all turned to stare at Gustav with slightly surprised expressions like they were trying to read him. They just assumed he was some kid with a rich background or something and went back to discussing amongst themselves like he wasn't there. Gustav sat on the seat on the far right and stared at the circular stage beyond the see-through glass. Without even activating God Eyes, he could tell that the see-through glass was quite strong. This was the best room to be in since it had a small number compared to the others, just in case he wanted to try anything. Gustav spotted the small opening by the west side of the stage, which he was obviously where the fighters would come out from. Chapter 673. The stage was dark brown, and a small projection was displayed several feet high up, showing the list of fighters that would be battling this night. Gustav looked at the list, which was stopped at number 12, which meant 24 fighters would be stepping on the stage this night. Gustav spotted the name Eldorado at number 6. Mr. Eldorado versus Carisas, he muttered underneath his breath with a slightly confused expression. This Carisas was not among the list of fighters I searched for. A new fighter? Gustav thought with a suspicious look. No, they don't recruit till another 2 days. Among the list of previously recruited fighters, this Carisas wasn't mentioned. Gustav couldn't understand where this Carisas suddenly appeared from, but at the moment, the fight already looked suspicious to him. However, at the moment, there was nothing he could do except wait and try one more thing out. God Eyes have been activated. Gustav's eyes turned crimson and green with a gold in the middle as he stared at the entrance area of the stage. Shriery Eye, his sight instantly went through the see-through glass and kept phasing forward till it went through the corridor. As it kept traveling forward, he could see some people moving about in door to rooms by the sides of the corridor, which was most likely where the fighters were settling in. The first match would start by 8 p.m., which was only a few minutes away, and it would be streamed online for everyone to see. So right now, the fighters were waiting, and some were loitering about. Gustav scanned through the rooms one after the other, from left to right and from right to left again. The fighters seemed to be practicing in some rooms, while some were just sitting around waiting. Every room had a weapon stand, and from the look of things, the fighters seemed to be well equipped. Gustav's eyes squinted as his sight arrived at the second to the last room by the left. The person he had been looking for all this time was seated on what looked like a bench linked to the wall. Boss Danzo, Gustav said internally as he noticed the look of anxiety on his face. Boss Danzo had his hands in front of his face, joined together as he leaned his chin against them. He seemed to be in deep thought. Gustav looked around the room and could see weapons as well. If only there was a way to talk to him before the match, Gustav thought. First fight, Dash Mogul versus Dinetro. A loud announcement was made by an AI who also mentioned that the first match would start in the next 2 minutes and the fighters should prepare themselves. There was no way Gustav could speak with Boss Danzo before the match, and even Sir Zil, who had promised to help him get the chance to speak with Boss Danzo after the match, said it would be impossible to speak with him before unless Gustav wanted to try something silly which would cause problems for both himself, Sir Zil, Damien, and even Boss Danzo. Gustav was about to retract his eyesight when he spotted something in the next room by mistake. Isn't that a kid? Gustav's eyes widened slightly as he spotted a teenage girl in the next room. This girl was around 53 dressed in shorts and a sleeveless green top. She was waving around 2 glowing daggers with a look of determination. She struck, slashed, and hacked sideways repeatedly. It seemed she was training. Her face twitched twice as she suddenly stopped waving the daggers around and turned to stare in Gustav's sight direction. Gustav was a bit startled as it looked like they were staring at each other, but this was impossible since Gustav was very far away at the moment. After a few moments, she turned away and kept the daggers before moving forward to take some of the long-range weapons stacked on the weapon rack. Why is a kid preparing to battle here? Gustav said internally with a repressed look as he retracted his eyesight. Gustav had checked, so he knew nobody less than 19 years of age was allowed to join the fighters here, and he also hadn't seen any information on this kid before. Gustav quickly put 2 and 2 together as his face lit up with an expression of realization. She's Carissa's, Gustav muttered. Boss Danzo's opponent is a kid. Gustav realized this was more twisted than he thought. I need to find a way to stop this match. The instant he thought of this, A small cheer was heard in the facility. It was 8 p.m. already, and one of the fighters seemed to be approaching the stage already. The people who watched the illegal underground fights from their homes had already tuned in. A holographic projection of a log displayed the number of people tuned in all across the world, and it was already bordering on 1 million. In the next few moments, both fighters could be seen standing in the middle of the underground arena, ready to battle. One was a buxom-looking young woman dressed in tight-fitted red pants and top. She had a scar that looked like an arrow tip on her forehead and a mischievous look. The other was a muscular man who immediately tore his shirt open as he arrived on stage carrying a massive 6-foot-long hammer. "Hee, I hope you're ready to meet your maker, Mogul," he voiced out with a deep voice as he lifted the hammer and placed it on his left shoulder. "This Dinetro. All that build and you're still small in the place that matters the most. Disappointing," she said with a light chuckle while unsheathing a katana from her back. "I hope you want change words after receiving a pounding from my hammer," he said with a look of anguish while raising his hammer. Mogul vs. Dinetro. Fight. The instant the go-ahead was given, both opponents charged towards each other. Chapter 674. Mogul vs. Dinetro. Fight. The instant the go-ahead was given, both opponents charged towards each other. "Hi-oh!" Dinetro screamed out as he raised his hammer while dashing forward and brought it down, descending upon Mogul's head. Mogul paused her charge and jumped slightly to the side. Bang! A loud sound of collision reverberated across the place as the hammer slammed onto the stage. Mogul jumped towards the side, landing on the neck of the hammer before Dinetro could lift it back up. So woof! A pillar of bright red flames burst forth from the ground where she had just leaped from. Dinetro raised the hammer up along with Mogul, flinging her upwards. Mogul didn't expect that Dinetro had enough strength to still lift her along with the massive hammer, so she was taken by surprise as her body was flung into the air. Dinetro raised his hammer high up again as he waited for a little for Mogul's body to descend before flinging the massive hammer upwards like he was throwing an uppercut. Mogul descended with her katana stretched out as she proceeded to swirl in the air to give it more momentum while hacking towards Dinetro with it. Fwy! Bang! A loud sound of collision was made once again as her katana collided with his hammer, and her body trembled violently in midair before she was sent flying. The immense force from the swing of the hammer was ridiculously higher than what Mogul had expected. As she landed several feet away, her eyes widened as she quickly rolled towards the side after spotting the face of a massive hammer descending upon her. Bang! 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 She kept rolling from side to side as Dinetro kept pounding downwards with his hammer, missing her body by a few inches each time. If it wasn't for her speed, Mogul would have gotten turned into meat paste by now. Landing another hit on the ground, Mogul suddenly spun across the ground while pushing her body up. Bam! Her leg slammed into Dinetro's face, causing him to stagger backward, dropping the hammer. She quickly made use of the opportunity to charge forward while swinging out her katana horizontally. Dinetro tried to dodge by his chest was soon marked by bleeding plus sign as Mogul struck twice. Kiar! He screamed out in pain as he tried moving away. On the third swing, he swerved to the side and grabbed her hand before pulling her forward. Bam! His head slammed into hers, causing her to stagger backward as she felt everything turning white. Clang! Her katana fell to the stage floor as she found herself being lifted into the air due to her spinning line of sight. Dinetro proceeded to slam Mogul into the ground, causing her to black out. "Oomph!" he exclaimed as he stared at his blood-soaked chest and proceeded to move forward to grab his hammer. At this point, lots of people who were tuning in were already chanting his name. Dinetro! Finish her! Dinetro grabbed his massive hammer on the ground and turned around to walk back towards Mogul's position on the ground. Bullocks, and I bet on her. What a disappointment. Within the rooms where the rich and powerful were watching the battle, those who bet on Mogul were disappointed as they saw Dinetro's shadow looming over her along with his hammer, which was raised up. Just as Dinetro was about to slam down with his hammer, Mogul suddenly opened her eyes and did a flip roll on the floor. Bang! Just as the hammer landed on the ground just a few inches in front of her, she tapped a button on the side of her chest. Truth, small bluish turbo flames shot out from the back of her boots as she suddenly dashed towards the side. Fwum, a pillar of flames jetted out of the ground the instant she moved away from her initial location again. Dinetro, who had thought she was out cold, was shocked, but before he could react, a katana was already slicing towards his head. He couldn't raise the hammer fast enough to block it, so he raised his hand instead. Unsurprisingly, the katana cut through his elbow and the rest of his hand and kept traveling towards his face till it divided it into two halves. Flr, the sound of meat slicing apart along with brain matter reverberated across the place. Blood spilled across the air as Dinetro's body fell limply towards the ground. The fiery boots powered down as she arrived 20 feet ahead of the corpse and swung her katana towards the side to get rid of the blood on its blade. Her forehead was bleeding, and she could feel that some of her ribs were shattered from the impact of Dinetro's slam, but she was in a much better state than him. Dash Mogul wins, the loud robotic voice of an AI announced her as the winner as she sheathed her katana and moved towards the exit. Everyone was still in shock as some watching cheered while the rich and powerful here who bet on her had smiling faces. Haha, Minu, didn't I tell you to bet on her? One of the men in Gustav's room voiced out. Until a while ago, you were regretting your choice and telling me you wished you had listened to me. TCH, I was sure she was faking it. So I had to as well, the men in the room argued. But Gustav was unconcerned about their bets. He wanted to go find Sir Zil to inform him about the situation at hand and how he could stop the match. However, he stopped himself for several reasons. There were up to 50 rooms, and he probably wouldn't be allowed to enter without using force if they were all filled up. Telling Sir Zil about the situation might not help, because what exactly could he do to stop the match that didn't go against the rule of the place? He would be dragging him into an unsavory situation. Chapter 675. Thinking about all this, Gustav felt dealing with the situation himself would be the best course of action. Since he was here alone, he could also pretend not to have any ties with Sir Zil and Damien when he finally decided on what to do. They had helped him to this point, so he didn't want his actions to put them in trouble. If the situation didn't look bad, he would have waited till after the match, but then he couldn't sit by and watch a kid getting slaughtered. Especially after finding out that so far, all the enemies that Boss Danzo had battled were ex-convicts who were involved in one kind of crime or multiple. This made him feel a bit better about Boss Danzo murdering them, seeing as they weren't the innocent type anyways. But this didn't mean he had disputed the fact that Boss Danzo was now a different person. He still had a lot of questions for him. Gustav was glad the room was slightly darkened with only a dim red light placed within. However, the stage was very bright to give them a clear view. The men in the room paid him no heed, so Gustav was sure they hadn't properly taken a good look at his face. VRRHHH, he slowly transformed, turning his face longer and thinner while his hair also changed into a white color. Gustav now had a different look from behind. While he made a plan, the next battle had already begun. After this one, only 3 more would be left before it was Boss Danzo's turn. Gustav activated God Eyes again and stared at the glass up ahead. With the amount of reading him getting from the protective energy around the glass, it would take at least 26 full-powered attacks for me to shatter it. This would take too much time, which gives them the chance to send guards after me before I'm done, Gustav thought. 2 more options. 1. I absorb the energy into one of my orbs, so when the time comes, it would be easy for me to shatter the glass, but the absorption period would also take time since the energy is a bit complicated. I may or may not be done before the Boss Danzo fight begins. The second option is I find the waiting room and get Boss Danzo out of here before the fight begins. The second option looked more appealing to Gustav, but it didn't change that it would still be tough to get to the waiting room talk more of breaking Boss Danzo out. Also, he still hadn't figured out what would happen with the kid. There was so much he didn't know at the moment. After thinking about it a few more times, Gustav decided he would find a way to visit the waiting room before Boss Danzo's fight began. Thinking up to this point, he proceeded to stand to his feet and walked out of the room. A few minutes later, Gustav approached the bathroom area after asking the staff around. He approached the west area of the facility and arrived at a small corridor that led to the bathroom. Gustav went in and stood in one of the cubicles before activating God Eyes. His sight instantly went through the bathroom and straight towards the first room up ahead, which had about 10 people within. Gustav turned his eyes to the sides, looking for any route or entry point that led downwards towards where the fighters were waiting their turn. At this point, the second battle had just finished. Lahiem Wins, a blue armored man, stood in the middle of the stage with both his hands raised as the crowd cheered. By the side, a corpse of another man could be seen with his eyes gouged out and a hole in the middle of his belly region. Some staff came towards the stage to take the corpse away as the victorious fighter moved towards the exit. The facility was massive, so Gustav was still checking for the right direction to head in while the third battle began. At this point, only 2 battles were left before it would be Boss Danzo's turn. After a few more minutes, Gustav spotted something on the southeast side of the circular structure, a small stairway beyond the wall that led downwards. The problem was this was beyond the wall, which meant the access way was something that closed and opened. Activating it was something only the staff probably knew. Even with this, Gustav decided to walk out of the bathroom and began heading towards that area. In a few minutes of walking, he arrived right in front of the area where there was a stairway beyond the wall. There was no sign that this place led somewhere else in the slightest. Gustav proceeded to place his hand on it as he thought of whether he should destroy it or not. There will definitely be alarms triggered. While Gustav thought, he sensed footsteps from up ahead. Cognitive concealment has been activated. Gustav's presence disappeared as he moved towards the side and took out a button-sized object from his storage ring. Zing, as it appeared in his hand. He placed it on his forehead and tapped on its surface. Try-high, he instantly turned invisible. I only have 2 of these left, so I have to use it wisely, he thought as he leaned against the wall by the side. Zzhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhh towards the side. Dash, his guts were scattered all over the place. Dash, at least this cleanup isn't as bad as the last battle. Dash, I've gotten used to it anyway. The three figures coming through the door spoke with each other as they carried items out. Two of them had a body bag which each person held from the side, while the third one seemed to be carrying cleaning pieces of equipment. Gustav quickly moved towards the opening on the wall and darted in before it closed up. The three walked along the circular corridor without suspecting that someone infiltrated before the opening closed back up. Chapter 676. The three walked along the circular corridor without suspecting that someone infiltrated before the opening closed back up. Gustav walked down the stairway, which wasn't too long. Before he reached the bottom, the time of invisibility ran out and he became visible again. However, he still did not deactivate cognitive concealment, as this really helped to hide his presence. Unless they saw him with their eyes, it would be impossible for normal people and most mixed bloods to sense his presence. Gustav finally arrived at the bottom of the stairs, reaching an intersection. Turning to look at the path that led left, it kept going for quite a while before twisting towards the right at an end, and that was as far as normal eyes could see. The path which led right came to an end only a few feet away, with a small opening that led to what seemed like another corridor. Gustav activated God Eyes and stared at the right side first. His eyes squinted as he deactivated God Eyes while muttering underneath his breath. Finally, he could see a few people moving about that corridor, but he felt there would be no need to use another invisibility button since that was the corridor of the waiting room. Gustav did not even bother checking what was on the left, or where it led to, because this was no time to play detective. His goal was to get to Boss Danzo as soon as possible. At this moment, the third fight was already reaching a stage where it could end at any moment. Gustav walked quickly and arrived at the opening on the right pathway before going through it. He had waited for a little, so some of the people moving around could lessen a bit. He hung his head down as he turned right again after arriving at the corridor. The path left led to the fighting stage, and Gustav, for a moment, spotted both opponents grabbing onto each other's throat and pummeling the other's face. He only glanced at that area for less than a second, and he had captured the details of everything happening. The blood oozing down their faces and injuries were since the battle began. A staff passed by Gustav's side but didn't suspect anything. Their thought was, Anyone here was either a fighter or a staff. Arriving at the second to the last door on the left, Gustav turned around and stood in front of it. He could sense the living being within, breathing and moving around anxiously. Gustav raised his hand and proceeded to knock. Calm, calm. He sensed that the prancing around stopped the moment he knocked. Is it time? He heard Boss Danzo's tough voice from within. Gustav was instantly hit with a wave of emotions as he heard his voice. A smile appeared on his face as he proceeded to knock again. Calm, calm. All right, they'll be out in a bit. Boss Danzo voiced out again. Calm, calm. Gustav knocked yet again, causing Boss Danzo to speak once more. I said he'll be out in a bit. Give me a second. Calm, calm. Hey, what's? Boss Danzo voiced with a frustrated tone as, catch him. The door slid open. The familiar yet older and slightly disheveled face of Boss Danzo appeared in his line of sight. I said give me a min. He noticed that something was off about the person standing in front of him, so he paused his speech. Who are? Before he could ask, Gustav suddenly pushed him in and closed the door behind. Hey, what are you doing? Boss Danzo asked with a slightly annoyed tone as he tried to stabilize himself after staggering backward. He could see the 6-foot-tall kid with an oblong-shaped face and white hair standing in front of the door. To him, this person didn't seem like a staff member, and the person couldn't be one of the fighters since he knew everyone who was fighting tonight. It's me, Gustav voiced out with a smile. You who? Wait, that voice. Boss Danzo was initially confused, but then his eyes widened as he pictured a face. A flesh-wriggling sound could be heard next as Gustav's face transformed. He returned to his original look. Dirty blonde hair, well-chiseled jawline, and an extremely charming face. Gustav, my boy, you're here. Boss Danzo couldn't believe his eyes as he voiced out while moving closer to Gustav. Yeah, Boss Danzo, it's me. Gustav smiled as he responded. Boss Danzo proceeded to share a hug with Gustav, patting his back repeatedly as he laughed joyously. His face glowed up with happiness at this moment as he separated from Gustav to scrutinize him from top to bottom and from bottom to top. You've grown so much, Boss Danzo voiced out with a tone of astonishment. Gustav just chuckled lightly in response before voicing out. You, on the other hand, seem to have gotten shorter. Both of them laughed lightly before moving towards the side to sit. Boss Danzo still couldn't believe his eyes, seeing Gustav looking like a mountain compared to the last time he saw him. He knew Gustav was growing very fast at that time when he was still a cook in Echelon Academy, but he had not expected Gustav to reach up to 6 feet in just a year and a few months. It was a very irregular growth speed. How is everything going with the MBO, kid? He asked. So much has happened. I have so much to tell you, and you have a lot of catching up to do, Gustav responded. All in due time. Make sure to tell me everything later, Boss Danzo voiced out. I take this as you got my message? He added. I didn't. There was a problem with the communication, but I could tell that something was wrong, which is why I'm here, Gustav explained. There was a problem with the communication? Boss Danzo voiced out with a tone of confusion. Yeah, static sounds. I could only hear 1 or 2 words, Gustav stated. That's... Boss Danzo had a suspicious look as he mumbled. Chapter 677. Does that mean you're here alone without any help? Boss Danzo asked. Yes, I came by myself. What exactly is going on? Gustav responded and proceeded to ask with a look of curiosity. This will be too dangerous for you to handle by yourself. Boss Danzo became worried after finding out that Gustav was here all by himself. Tell me about the situation, so I know how to properly process it. I came to the city and found out that you've been engaged in illegal-related activities. Still don't understand what is happening? Gustav voiced out. There's no time for me to explain everything, but I promise there's a good reason why I'm here right now. I will tell you everything after we find a way to get out of here, Boss Danzo said with a slightly remorseful look. Gustav didn't and wouldn't doubt him. He could still see the look of kindness in Boss Danzo's eyes, similar to what he remembered. What Gustav didn't know was, no one else had seen this side of Boss Danzo. He had been disguising himself since he became a part of the illegal underground fights. I saw that you're up against a kid. I thought the age qualification to be a part of this was higher? Gustav questioned. That is exactly why I called. I wanted to deal with everything on my own since I brought this mess upon myself, but am sorry, my boy. I had to involve you because I can't take the life of an innocent kid. Boss Danzo looked down as he voiced out. It doesn't change the fact that I am a murderer, but this one is something I can't do, he added. Gustav placed his hand on Boss Danzo's right shoulder before speaking. I know about everything and can't blame you since it was needed for survival. Besides, they were all criminals and murderers, so their deaths mean one less scum on the earth, but I still need to understand what's going on. Let me explain the predicament surrounding the kid I'm meant to battle today. Boss Danzo voiced out before he began narrating. A few minutes later, Boss Danzo had finished narrating and Gustav was busy digesting the information while also asking a few questions. She agreed to participate? Gustav asked. Yes. Kids make rash decisions based on feelings, so I can't blame her. Boss Danzo responded. Gustav turned to the wall and activated God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. His sight phased through the wall and he spotted the girl, Crisis. The girl still happened to be training with several daggers in her possession. She had a fierce look of determination on her face as she swung them around repeatedly. Let me go talk to her, Gustav voiced out while preparing to stand. Grab. Boss Danzo grabbed his arm before he could stand and voiced out, Don't bother. Her room is secured with a keycard. She won't be able to open it up from the inside as I did with you. The ring lords don't trust her to stay within, so they kept her there, and it will only be opened when it's time for our match, Boss Danzo explained. Those bastards. Setting up a 16-year-old like this, Gustav had no doubt now that they were all rotten to the core. This whole entire organization was already an illegal entity, and since he was an MBO officer, he should be planning to bring them down. However, there was no mixed blood-related activity going on here, so this duty fell more on the police than the MBO. The MBO barely ever got involved in normal humans and Slarkov's activities. I want to break you out, Gustav stated his intentions. I can't leave the girl by herself. She would be grouped with someone else after my disappearance, and when that happens, her death would be certified, Boss Danzo stated. Also, alarms will be triggered if you try to get me out of here, and we might end up being trapped since we're currently underground, he added with a contemplative look. Do you mean there are preventive measures set up for this kind of scenario? Gustav asked. Exactly that. It's easier for us to get trapped here right now since we're further underground than the spectators, Boss Danzo added. Gustav thought about it, and it really did make sense. He would be trying to escape with two people, so being further underground was even more dangerous. I have an idea, Gustav said as he squinted his eyes. But you must be able to convince her before you walk up to that stage, Gustav said with a tone of caution. There is no way to talk to her before the match, Boss Danzo stated. Gustav proceeded to stand to his feet and turn to the wall. Atomic disintegration has been activated. His index finger lit up with a milky-colored glow as he proceeded to stab it into the wall. This will take some time, so I'll explain to you what you have to do in the meantime, Gustav said as his finger slowly drilled through the wall. Minutes later, Gustav was already walking back towards his seat within the spectator's room he stayed in earlier. He had managed to avoid most of the staff he saw on the way, and only one of them stared at him with a suspicious look. He had told Boss Danzo exactly what he had to do, and the only real hurdle he saw at the moment was convincing the young girl to play along. At this point, the fourth match just ended and the fighters for the fifth match were already making their way to the stage. Boss Danzo's match would be next, so he had very limited time in convincing a girl that was fully determined to go up against him with the thought of receiving freedom to be with her lover after winning. In the meantime, Gustav also had his part to play, so he quickly arrived back in the room he stayed in earlier. I have lost 3 bets today. Kazim is such a good fighter. I knew he wouldn't disappoint. My fortune is good this night. The voices of the 3 men he met within the room earlier filled up the place as he walked in. Chapter 678. The voices of the 3 men he met within the room earlier filled up the place as he walked in. One of them was mentioning how he had already made over 100 million, while another one was mentioning how he had lost so much this night. They only seemed to care about the bet. As Gustav walked in, they stared at him for a few moments again before returning to their conversations. A few ladies in skimpy outfits walked in later on to serve drinks and food items. "Oh, this one looks good," one of the men voiced out as he grabbed the butt of one of the ladies and pulled her to sit on his laps. She made a low shrieking sound as he ran his hands through her face. While this was going on by the side, Gustav had shifted his seat forward and was only a few inches away from the glass. He proceeded to place his right hand on it. Gravitational energy container bloodline has been activated. Unbeknownst to them by the side, Gustav had begun absorbing the energy attached to the glass. He would have conjured an orb to send the energy there, but that would warrant suspicions if it was seen. Currently, he was absorbing the energy into his right arm. It kept bulging as he continued to absorb the energy. On the stage, the two opponents currently battling were women. One was a slim and tall lady with brown short hair. She had what looked like a reddish-colored shotgun in her grasp and kept firing out explosive blasts at her opponent. The other was a massive, plus-sized black woman with white hair and a 6-feet-long metal pole in her grasp. Fly, she spun the pole around while moving from side to side, parrying the red blasts. Swinging out the metallic-looking pole, a crescent-shaped fluorescent-colored energy shot out of it. The other slim woman rolled to the side, dodging the attack while also shooting out as her body rolled across the stage. The battle still seemed to be in a stalemate, as neither of them got the advantage yet. All fighters were equipped with a good piece of fighting technology, which was why every weapon had its perks. They were all normal humans or Slarkovs, but the fight was fiercer because of the attacks being thrown around. As the battle turned fiercer, Gustav focused on the energy he was drawing out from the glass. One of the men in the room with him was still busy messing around with the serving girls while the others laughed and took bites out of the food they were served. One of the girls walked towards Gustav on the side and offered food. "I'm okay, thanks," Gustav answered while his hand was still placed on the glass. The lady nodded with a smile and moved towards the side, thinking Gustav was probably more interested in the fight. "At least this one is not a creep like the others," she said internally while shaking her head in pity as she stared at her colleague being molested by the side. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do about it. This was part of the bargain when they were asked to work here, but on the bright side, the creepy men could not go beyond this. Eventually, the girl was able to get away from them and all three girls moved out of the room quickly. "That one is pretty good. I will ask Thorman to give her to me," the man at the far edge voiced out with a perverse tone. "Didn't you get one last week?" Another one of the three men asked. "I did, but I'm tired of her now. I've been going at her all week. I need fresh meat and this one qualifies," he responded and broke into a light laughter. "Oh, remember there's a kid here, we shouldn't be too loud. But even the kid will be just like us one day, so it doesn't matter." Gustav could hear everything from the side, but he didn't pay them any heed. 30% absorbed, Gustav said in his mind, as he continued absorbing the energy from the glass. At this point, the battle within the ring was no longer at a stalemate. One of the fighters seemed to be seriously injured. Bam, bam, bam. The plus-sized black woman pummeled the slim brown-haired lady with her fist. Her massive behind pressed the lady to the ground, slowly crushing her internals while her face was being disfigured with punches as well. The slim lady groaned in pain as she tried pulling herself from the pin, but it was all to no avail. Her nose had been dislocated and her left eye had already closed up. Her face was smeared in blood, and she was close to passing out. "Hi-ya!" The black plus-sized woman raised both of her fists up, interlocking them, and she gathered all her strength there in preparation to end the fight with this one last strike. PPPFFLL. The slim lady spat a mouthful of blood out into her eyes, causing her to close her eyes and try to clean them up. Using this opportunity, the slim lady elbowed the plus-sized black woman to her face, causing her to stagger towards the side. She was free and made use of this opportunity to roll to the side even though her whole body was hurting and grabbed hold of her weapon. The plus-sized black woman also regained her stability at this point and tried moving as quickly as possible to the side before the slim brown-haired lady pulled the trigger. Bang! Kairar! The dark-skinned plus-sized woman screamed out as her left arm was blasted into smithereens while she slid across the stage, staining it with thick, red liquid. The slim lady broke down after firing that shot. Her body couldn't respond properly to her commands due to the severe injuries she had received. Chapter 679. Her fingers and legs kept trembling as she tried to lock her grip on the gun and stand. She wanted to finish the job, but due to weakness from injuries, she was delayed. Her face was smeared in blood, and her outfit was stained red as well. She could feel she had internal injuries as well. While she was struggling to get it together and finish the job, the plus-sized lady who had been laying on the ground for the past few seconds moved. Making use of her one functional arm, she pushed herself up, standing to her feet, and stared at her left shoulder, which was bleeding and void of an arm. Her face lit up in pain and anguish as she moved towards where her staff was laying on the floor and picked it up. Hi-yo! She threw it like a javelin towards the slim lady. Bang! It slammed into her forehead, knocking her out in an instant as she dropped the gun subconsciously. Bang! This caused the trigger to be pulled once again, shooting out a beam that obliterated the plus-sized black woman's right leg in the next instant. Another scream of pain was heard as she fell to the floor of the stage. She was bleeding from her right knee area profusely, which was missing the rest of the leg. She groaned in pain profusely as she had now lost her left arm and her right leg. She couldn't get to her opponent, who had now passed out at this time. Everyone was stunned, watching from within the facility and other locations online. This battle had gone in an unexpected route. Now nobody knew who would win. Both were still alive, however, incapacitated and passed out. The battle would not end unless someone was dead, and the situation just made things complicated. While everyone was debating on how this would end, Gustav was secretly rejoicing, as this would waste more time and give him the chance to absorb more of the energy from the glass before Boss Danzo's match came on. Hopefully, he'll be able to convince her, Gustav said inwardly, while still focusing on absorbing the energy. In the next few minutes, there was still no movement on stage, and the higher-ups were beginning to think of a plan to take care of the current situation. Just as they were about to send someone over there, the slim brown-haired lady opened her eyes. Everywhere seemed blurry to her as she tried to recall where she was. Am not dead? She was surprised she wasn't killed yet. Then she spotted the plus-sized black woman up ahead, laying on the stage and trying to pull herself forward with one hand. This was where the battle came to an end. The slim brown-haired lady made use of her last strength to pick up her gun and fired twice at her opponent, blasting her body apart. Bang! Bang! Blood and body parts splattered across the stage, bringing the fifth battle to an end. 70%. Gustav said inwardly as he noticed that the battle had ended. Boss Danzo will have to hold on for a while and put on a good show till I'm done, Gustav said internally. Trizilla wins, the robotic voice of an AI announced. There were cheers all across the locations connecting to the battle online. They couldn't believe that Trizilla still managed to win even when all odds were against her. The staff moved towards the stage and cleared out the winner as well as the corpse remains of the loser. Trizilla had passed out again after winning, but it didn't matter, since she already won. All that was left was for her to receive treatment. Mr. Eldorado versus Carices, the AI announced as everyone spotted Boss Danzo walking into the fight arena with a black apron tied to his body and a black hat. On his fingers, for claw-like rings could be seen. There were cheers from even within the facility as he arrived on stage with his head down. Gustav could not help but admit that he looked quite badass at the moment. Boss Danzo touched the tip of his hat and nodded like it was a signature act. Unknown to those at the original location, the viewers were already cheering loudly as he arrived. His opponent is already dead. Everyone had this in mind, as well as the question, who is Carices? They had never heard of this fighter before, so they assumed it must be a new one, which made them intrigued. 80%, Gustav said internally as he spotted the new figure approaching the stage. It was a 53 tall girl, dressed in shorts and a sleeveless green top. She had a kind of small cloak wrapped around her head to her waist, which hid the daggers strapped to her waist. Is that the Carices? No one could see her face properly due to the cover-up. All they noticed was she was short, and she looked a bit young based on what was revealed, but they had no idea that she was actually a kid because a lot was covered up. Boss Danzo and Carices stared at each other with intensity as they stood several feet opposite themselves. Boss Danzo stared at the glasses up ahead, covering the rooms of the spectators from the corner of his eyes like he was looking for something. After a brief moment, he held his hat and turned it sideways twice. Fight, The instant the go-ahead was given, both of them darted at each other fiercely. Fwyi Thrura, Carices spread her cloak with both hands, causing 4 daggers to fly up from her figure. Boss Danzo arched his right arm back as the claw-like rings grew longer, covering 4 of his fingers up and growing longer, making his fingers look like actual claws as he slashed forward. Carices spun as she grabbed hold of 2 daggers in midair, slicing towards Boss Danzo as well. Clank, clank. Sounds of metallic collision reverberated across the place. Chapter 680. Clank, clank. Sounds of metallic collision reverberated across the place. Both of them engaged each other in battle, clashing repeatedly. Each of Boss Danzo's attacks caused Carices to stagger backward as the sheer strength from each clash was higher than hers. The spectators were already cheering loudly as they saw Boss Danzo's attacks pushing the girl back. However, they were quite astonished to see how skilled she was since she managed to parry every attack that had been dished out so far. Now that Gustav was watching Boss Danzo fight in person, he had to admit that Boss Danzo had very good moves. This had him wondering how Boss Danzo became so good at fighting. He looked like a veteran fighter with his moves. The maid girl Carices was also good with her moves. Even though she wasn't as strong as Boss Danzo, neither did her skills seem sharpened enough. She was quite fast. Dodging one of Boss Danzo's slashes, she jumped upwards and threw her leg towards his face. Pa! He grabbed hold of it and flung her towards the back. Bam! She slammed face down onto the stage behind. Boss Danzo stood in place and touched the tip of his hat with a cool look like he could hear the cheers of the audience all across the world. Everyone knew how he fought. He wouldn't be the crowd favorite if his battles weren't done with a bit of style. The girl slowly pulled herself upwards and started taking steps backward while Boss Danzo walked towards her with a cool look. She gritted her teeth as she brought out a dagger and threw it forward. Fly-high, Boss Danzo slightly twisted his body towards the left, causing the blade to slice past his face with only a few centimeters gap from making contact. He turned his body to normal as a loud slicing sound was heard from behind. The dagger that was thrown out had turned around midair and started flying back to where it came from. It spun across the air with speed, slicing towards the back of Boss Danzo's head before anyone could react. Grab. His fingers, which were covered in claw-like rings, grabbed hold of the dagger a few inches before it made contact with the back of his head. Boss Danzo brought the dagger to his front and stared at it for an instant. Just as he wanted to fling it out, it beeped a red light twice. Boom. A small explosion sent Boss Danzo flying as the dagger disintegrated into dust. His apron flapped as he landed on his feet and slid backward by a few more feet with a trail of black smoke left in his wake. His black apron glowed a low dark light as coughed twice before raising his hand and catching his hat that got blasted off his head as well. The instant he stopped sliding and placed it back on his head, for more daggers tore through the small cloud of black smoke up ahead, flying straight at him. He quickly jumped to the side and rolled away. The daggers stabbed into the wall up ahead and exploded upon contact. They barely caused any damage to the wall since it was very tough and self-reparable. Boss Danzo began charging towards her again as she gathered 3 more daggers in her hands and flung them out. Boss Danzo made use of the claw-like covering on his fingers and slashed out quickly, slapping the daggers away before they could explode. Boom, boom, boom. 3 more small explosions rang out by the sides as Boss Danzo kept dashing forward to engage her. She stared at the daggers strapped to her waist and noticed that only 2 were left, while 1 more was in her left grasp. She pulled out 1 more, holding 2 daggers in both her hands as he charged forward as well. Within one of the small spectating rooms, for people sat on luxurious-looking chairs with tables positioned in front of them like they were in a dining hall. There were different delicacies served there as this group of 4 watched the ongoing battle with keen eyes. One was a woman with blonde hair and buxom features. She had black lipstick on and looked like she was around 30 years of age. 2 out of the 4 were men dressed in luxurious-looking purple suits. One was bald and the other had black short hair with a slightly feminine facial look but stern eyes. While the last person was a teenage boy with black hair and patches of blonde with very fair skin. He looked extremely feminine, with tender lips and a weak-looking countenance. "The girl seems to be more than we expected," the blonde woman voiced out. "It would seem that way. However, Eldorado won't lose to her," the bald man voiced out. "He must just have been surprised like we were and underestimated the kid," the feminine-looking man stated. "She will win," the boy voiced out with a confident tone. "Son, I admire your love for this lower life, but you will have to let go of her. Mr. Eldorado will cut her to pieces this night," the woman voiced out with a merciless tone. "No, Mom. She will win. I trust Carissa's. She will prove you all wrong and we will be together," the feminine-looking teenage boy said, and proceeded to bite his lower lip with an anxious look. "I guess we shall see. Although it would be quite pitiful to lose such an able worker, she brought this upon herself," the blonde woman voiced out while scoffing. "Carissa's, you can do this." The feminine-looking teenage boy clenched his fist in his seating position while saying inwardly. These were the main members of the Rell family, which was an influential family in Burning Sands Village. The blonde woman was Mrs. Triss Rell, and the feminine-looking man was her husband, Mr. Piltria Rell, who was also the head of the household. The bald man was his brother, and the kid was their only son, Marshall Rell, who was the reason for the current predicament with Carissa's. Created a new story, Advent of the Depraved Battle Mage. Make sure to check it out. Chapter 681. He and Carissa's had been dating secretly until the mom realized her son had fallen in love with an ordinary maid, contrary to her plans for his future love life. Marshall could only hope that Carissa's would be able to come out on top here. But with the looks of things, that was close to impossible as he recalled Eldorado fights with past opponents. They watched as Carissa's was pushed back, slowly dominated by Boss Danzo's attacks. Multiple injuries began to appear on her body as the fight continues. When will he use the 10 hits combo? This was the thought on everyone's mind as they hungered to see the finishing move once again. They knew he was just taking his time, and the battle would definitely end the moment he decided to unleash his finishing move. Gustav stared at the battle from his position as he calculated how much was left. 98%. Only a few more seconds, he said internally as he kept sucking the energy from the glass. Within a control room, an alarm went off as a holographic image displayed a part of the facility. A part of the image displayed a red blinking light, alarming the staff within. "What's going on? Why is it losing power?" one of them asked with a look of confusion. "No idea. It looks like its integrity will soon turn zero," another one voiced out. "Doesn't that mean it will turn completely weak and easy to break through?" The other staff voiced out. "Yes," another staff there answered. "We have to alert the boss immediately." 99%. Done. Gustav's eyes suddenly crackled with blue energy as he said internally. His right arm was glowing with blue color at the moment and was extremely bloated. It was 3 times larger than its original size and vein outlines could be seen all over. Gustav placed his left palm on the glass and brought down his thumb finger, displaying only 4 fingers. His fingers glowed a fiery bright light, causing attention to be drawn to himself from the stage area. The 3 in the same room with him also witnessed his glowing fingers, but had no idea what was happening. Boss Danzo had already spotted this and held onto his hat, pushing it up and down twice. Carissa's, who was bleeding from her forehead at this time, raised her hand. Fly, 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 fly. All the daggers strawn across the place lifted up into the air and started flying in her direction. Boss Danzo dodged them as she called them back to her, and they all floated around her. He moved to the side, backing the area where Gustav's spectating room was located. Making a hand sign, everyone focused back on him. He's about to use it. These were the thoughts in their heads, and some of them voiced it out in excitement as they watched. Fly, 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 fly. Carissa's flung out all the daggers surrounding her towards Boss Danzo, which he dodged swiftly while traveling towards her. The daggers stabbed into the wall up ahead, all making a kind of line across the wall in an upwards format. After dodging them all, Boss Danzo arrived in front of her, and several blade-like objects shot out of his finger as he spun around while swinging his hand out. Everyone had looks of excitement as they watched his fingers pierce towards the jaw of the girl. Suddenly, He stopped his fingers a few centimeters away from her face and reached to grab her arm. "Let's go," he voiced out to her hearing before turning around and running towards the wall area where the daggers were stabbed into. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Everyone was in disbelief and confusion as they saw the two opponents running side by side towards the wall up ahead. Boss Danzo grabbed onto her left arm tightly as he tapped a button on his shoulder area, causing his boots to make a weird sound. Tum! He jumped upwards with the girl in his grasp, elevating a few feet high and landing on one of the daggers stabbed into the wall. He kept holding onto her while stabilizing his footing and jumping a few feet upwards once again. Landing on the last dagger, which was up to 20 feet high up, there was still up to 7 feet of space left between Boss Danzo and the glass area where Gustav was situated. It was at this point that everyone seemed to realize what was going on. At the same time this was happening, the staff in the control room were reporting the situation of the glass that had lost all its protective energy. While the higher-ups were receiving that information, they spotted what was happening on the stage from the holographic projection within the room. "They're trying to escape. Stop them now." A loud shout was heard, and every guard within the place armed up and began moving towards the room area where Gustav was situated. Boss Danzo leaped up once again with the girl in his grasp, ascending a few feet upwards, but he was unable to reach the desired height. His eyes widened as his body reached the point where it started to descend right beneath the glass. Bang! Krrych. A loud sound of glass blasting to pieces rang out in the next second, and before Boss Danzo knew what was happening, a hand reached out speedily and grabbed onto his. Gustav had blasted the glass to pieces with a single punch and reached out to grab hold of Boss Danzo before he fell back to the stage. He easily pulled Boss Danzo and the girl up together, bringing them into the same room with him. The three in the room were terrified as they saw what was happening. "What are you doing?" one of them shouted out, but Gustav ignored him. Even though Gustav was currently using another identity, Boss Danzo had seen him before, so he knew it was Gustav. "Get on my back, we're leaving," he voiced out to the girl. "You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.